Chapter 646. A carriage was parked in the quiet mountain forest. An outsider would only think that this carriage was spacious, but an expert would be able to tell that this was no ordinary carriage. This was a carriage with 1 or 2 horses, which meant that there were 4 horses driving the same carriage. This was the emperor's carriage, and not just anyone could use such a standard. The body of the carriage was made of precious Fictional wood, and the color was mesmerizing and full of spiritual energy. Even collectors would find it difficult to make Fictional wood ornaments so uniform, but this large carriage was able to do it. There were no intricately carved beams or painted rafters on the carriage, nor were there any signs of the owner's identity. There were only a few simple carvings, which were not conventional and showed off their temperament. The 4 windows of the carriage were wrapped in exquisite golden silk, completely covering the inside of the carriage. It invisibly emitted a mysterious aura that made people want to peek inside. The carriage had 4 wheels, which were large and thick, and had excellent shock absorption. It must be mentioned that the body of the carriage was extremely large, and could fit 4 or 5 people at the same time without feeling crowded. Just like the simple exterior, the interior of the carriage was also very simple, but the style was completely different. It was so extravagant that it made people's hair stand up. There was only one spacious warm couch in the carriage, and it was covered with a very rare natural purple fox fur. The warm couch could be used to sit, lean, or lie down. There were 2 golden pillows on the left and right of the couch for leaning. In the middle was a small square table made of Fictional wood, and on top of it was a roux kiln tea set. In front of the warm couch was a bronze stove for heating purposes. The design was exquisite, and the workmanship was exquisite. When it burned, there was no smoke, not to mention charcoal. The interior of the carriage was covered with a tiger skin carpet, which was extremely luxurious. This was His Highness Duke of Qin's personal carriage, a place that countless women dreamed of. Not to mention sitting on it, even just looking inside the carriage was enough to make one have no regrets in life. At this time, Han Yunxi was sitting in the carriage, sulking. She sat on the right side of the warm couch, leaning on a high pillow and looking down at her feet. Her unhappiness was written all over her face, and she looked like she wanted strangers to disturb her. Long Fei sat on the left side, silently looking at her. His brows were slightly furrowed, and his deep, dark eyes revealed a bit of helplessness, a bit of doting, and a bit of worry. In short, he didn't know what to do with this woman. There was almost nothing in the world that was difficult for him. There were many things that he couldn't solve in a short period of time, but he had a plan in his heart and was confident of solving them. However, he just couldn't handle this woman. Compared to crying, he was more afraid that she would get angry silently. Han Yunxi was indeed angry. She didn't even bother to ask him if he was going to save her. Just yesterday, he had promised her that he would only be responsible for her. If he dared to mention anything about saving her today, she wouldn't mind poisoning him until his limbs were weak and then throwing him into a vat of vinegar to soak for 3 days and 3 nights. Let him know what it means to be jealous. Fortunately, Long Fei didn't mention a word about it. He said, "Shall we go back to Yaoshui? How are you going to explain this to your master?" Han Yunxi asked calmly. This was a huge problem. Let's go back first. Facing Duanmuyao, Long Fei didn't need to think too much. But facing his master, who had loved him like a father, he had to think. "Where's the letter?" Han Yunxi asked. Long Fei obediently gave her the letter from the old man in Kenzhou. Han Yunxi sorted through the contents before calling Chu Shifeng over. "Cold," she said, "if you can't find the person, return it. If you send it back again, you're not allowed to accept it." Outside, Chu Shifeng almost laughed out loud. Only esteemed Wang Fei could think of something like that. It was true that it was possible for a flying hawk to fail to find the person who sent the letter. Flying hawks couldn't speak, so who would know the truth if they sent the original letter back? Most of the time, it was assumed that they couldn't find the recipient. In any case, the old man in Kenzo rarely contacted His Highness over the years, so it was normal for a flying hawk to fail to find the person after 3 or 4 trips. Inside the carriage, Long Fei Ye's lips had long drawn up into a beautiful curve. He looked at Han Yunxi and couldn't resist the urge to tousle her beautiful bangs. He admired her cleverness as much as her petty cleverness. As soon as he extended his hand, Han Yunxi brushed it aside. She didn't speak to him, but asked Chu Shifeng cold, "Why aren't you going yet?" Chu Shifeng had long taken the letter, but he had to wait for His Highness's orders. Esteemed Wang Fei could make decisions on other matters, but Celestial Mountain was a special case. He still had to follow His Highness's orders. "What are you spacing out for?" Long Fei Yi quickly spoke up. Chu Shifeng had been scolded twice, but he was still willing to endure it. "Yes, this subordinate will do it right away." Chu Shifeng had followed His Highness Duke of Qin for so long that he knew what kind of person Duan Muyao was. He'd long wanted nothing more than for His Highness to cut ties with that woman. Once Chu Shifeng left, the two of them fell silent again. Long Fei Yi kept looking at Han Yunxi as if waiting for something. But after a while, Han Yunxi didn't pursue the matter. Instead, she intoned, "Let's go back." Long Fei Yi gave a start. He looked at her as if he wanted to speak, but stopped himself. After a while of silence, he saw that Han Yunxi didn't ask for his opinion, so he simply said, Then he called for the driver to set off. Han Yunxi immediately turned to look at him, only to see him staring out the window with a stiff expression. Her brows were creased into a frown. She wanted to say something, but in the end she shook her head and looked out the window as well. After a long while, Long Fei Yi glanced at her. Seeing her unmoved expression, his handsome brows creased as well. His eyelids drooped as he steeped the tea without making a sound. Usually, he handed her the first cup, but now he was pouring it for himself. The wheels of the carriage grew louder, breaking the silence of the forest and making the interior of the carriage seem even quieter. In the middle of the warm couch was a small tea table. Long Fei Yi leaned against the table and drank his tea expressionlessly. Han Yunxi sat to the side, far away from him. Just like that, they remained silent for the entire morning. The atmosphere in the carriage was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Even the driver sitting outside could feel the immense pressure. He carefully drove the carriage, afraid that he would make a mistake and become His Highness Duke of Qin's punching bag. It was already past noon when the carriage arrived at the county seat. The bustle outside made the carriage even quieter. This kind of atmosphere made one feel uneasy. Finally, the driver couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Your Highness, would you like to arrange lunch?" After all, His Highness Duke of Qin could never bear to let esteemed Wang Fei go hungry. He had never let esteemed Wang Fei go hungry on a long journey. What kind of major event had happened that made His Highness forget about eating? "What do you want to eat?" Long Fei Yi asked indifferently. "Anything," Han Yunxi replied. Long Fei Yi didn't ask any more questions. He instructed the driver, "Find a clean place." Then, the two of them fell into silence again. Before long, the driver found the most expensive restaurant in the county seat and booked a private room. "Your Highness, it's ready. The first room on the right on the second floor. The waiter is already waiting there." Long Fei Yi stood up and was about to get off when Han Yunxi's gaze finally fell on him. She was probably tormenting him on purpose. After he got off the carriage, she calmly said, "Long Fei Yi." Normally, he would respond with an lift the curtain, and carry her down. But right now, he only asked indifferently, "What is it?" Seeing this, the coachman didn't know whether or not he should come over and wait on them. His Highness Duke of Qin had stolen his job, and now that His Highness Duke of Qin wasn't going to wait on them, should he hurry up and put up the footstool? The driver was still hesitating when Han Yunxi suddenly shouted angrily, "Aren't you going to explain to me? You, get in the carriage." The driver's face turned green with fright. It wasn't that he was frightened by esteemed Wang Fei's sudden anger, but that he couldn't imagine that someone would dare to be so fierce to His Highness Duke of Qin. No, this wasn't just fierce, it was fierce giving an order. But the coachman saw His Highness Duke of Qin standing outside the carriage and laughing. Just a moment ago, His Highness Duke of Qin had been wearing a face as cold as ice, but now he was pursing his lips and silently snickering. The driver couldn't help but look to the west. The sun hadn't risen from the west yet. What was wrong with His Highness Duke of Qin? Although he doted on this woman, it wasn't to the extent that he would smile after being scolded. Seeing His Highness Duke of Qin quickly return to the carriage, the driver shook his head. Outsiders couldn't understand the world between His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei. He very consciously waited in the distance. After Long Fei got on the carriage, the smile on his face had long disappeared. He asked indifferently, "Explain what?" It would have been better if he hadn't said anything. As soon as he said this, the anger that Han Yunxi had been suppressing all morning exploded. "Explain what?" she asked incredulously. "So you don't think there's any need to explain?" She had been angry for so long, her displeasure written all over her face, but he hadn't explained a single word to her. If she didn't ask, would he be like before and not say anything? Would he only be willing to talk when she forced him and chased him? Why should I? Han Yunxi was so angry that her entire body felt unwell. This time, Long Fei really didn't understand. "What? Why should I? Why should your master want you to wait on her? Who is she to you? Isn't she already 18 years old? Don't tell me your master doesn't know that she's already 18 years old." Han Yunxi questioned word by word, "Why should he order you around like this? Do you owe her anything? Are you her father, her older brother, or her husband?" Long Fei didn't like these words, but he didn't have a chance to explain or refute. Han Yunxi continued to ask angrily, "Or have you always taken care of her like this before? Are you used to it?" Han Yunxi wasn't just angry. She was furious. Furious. She wasn't jealous of Duan Muyao. She just couldn't accept the fact that the old man in Kenzhou ordered Long Fei to wait on Duan Muyao like this. Why should he do this? 3 musts in a row, an absolute order. What was this? What did the old man in Kenzhou take the arrogant and high and mighty Long Fei for? Long Fei knew that she was angry, but he didn't expect her to be so angry. Moreover, she was angry at his master. He looked at Han Yunxi playfully and realized that this woman looked even better when she was angry than when she was serious. "Answer me," Han Yunxi said angrily. "Han Yunxi, I thought you would just let it go." He laughed. "Who's going to let it go? You're thinking too much." Han Yunxi was so angry that she didn't notice Long Fei's happiness at all. He cared so much about whether she minded or not. "Answer me." She was very fierce. "What does your master want? He doesn't know that this prince already has you. I'll bring you to see him when we go up the mountain in a few days," Long Fei said indifferently. Han Yunxi pushed his hand away. "So, he wants to set you up with Duan Muyao. Did he order you around like this before?" Chapter 647. In the past, Long Fei replied, "I didn't spend much time at Tianshan. Before I turned 18, I went there once a year. After that, I didn't go much. I haven't been back for 3 or 4 years now." Han Yunxi didn't say anything. She just narrowed her eyes at him. Long Fei knew that he didn't answer the main point. He didn't know if it was difficult to coax other women, but he knew that he couldn't coax this one. She either didn't ask, or once she did, she would get to the bottom of it. Every time I went up the mountain and received Master's guidance, would go into seclusion to cultivate. After I came out of seclusion, would immediately leave the mountain, Long Fei said. Didn't you go up and down the mountain together? Didn't you send her back to Western Zhou's imperial city? Han Yunxi asked angrily. She wasn't a narrow-minded person, but when it came to Long Fei, she was especially narrow-minded and narrow-minded. She couldn't tolerate even the slightest stain. This man had to belong to her completely. She refused to share anything with him, whether it was in the past or in the future. Long Fei didn't answer. He just looked at her and smiled helplessly. What are you laughing at? For the first time in her life, Han Yunxi was almost angered to death. Long Fei ignored her and shouted at the coachman outside, "Go and order some dishes first. Give me a plate of vinegar cabbage." Han Yunxi flew into a rage out of humiliation and kicked him. Long Fei, I'm not joking with you. You're still hung up on Duanmu Bei's words. Long Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Didn't he already explain clearly to Duanmu Bei when he was in Western Zhou? This woman actually knew how to bring up old scores. Then didn't your master often order you to take care of her? Did you go? This was definitely something that Han Yunxi minded the most. Last time, when Duanmu Yao came to find Long Fei on Elder Kenzo's orders, he followed her without a word. This showed how important Elder Kenzo was to him. Based on the letter from the old man in Kenzo, it was obvious that this was not the first time he ordered Long Fei to do so. God knows how many times he had given this order. Long Fei looked at her. There was a complicated look in his eyes, but he did not answer. Han Yunxi also looked at him and waited. But after waiting for a long time, he didn't say anything. She couldn't care less about being angry. Her heart was thumping wildly and her brows were tightly knitted together. She was very nervous. Answer me. The more nervous she was, the fiercer she became. The past, Long Fei had just opened his mouth when Han Yunxi suddenly covered his mouth and said bluntly, "Enough. What's done is done. I'm hungry. Let's eat." A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. Her face was even more like a child's in June, changing at will. Just as she was about to get out of the car, Long Fei suddenly hugged her waist from behind and pulled her into his embrace. You're not angry anymore." Han Yunxi shook her head. "Why is that?" Long Fei asked with interest. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi said, "Long Fei, I'm scared." She turned around and looked at him seriously. "Long Fei, I'm scared. I'm scared that no matter how hard I try, I won't be able to erase your past. I won't be able to be your one and only. Tell me, what should I do?" She had always been a person who didn't believe in heaven or earth. She only believed in herself. No matter how difficult it was, as long as she wanted to do it, she would definitely be able to do it. However, she couldn't do anything about his past. She couldn't participate in the things that he had experienced. She couldn't stop him from doting on others. How helpless. Long Fei's heart trembled slightly. He couldn't help but hug Han Yunxi tighter, wishing that he could rub her into his body. This was probably the longest confession he had ever heard. She let him hug her tightly and said frankly, "I mind. I mind a lot. Long Fei, what should we do?" If she was facing someone else, perhaps she would be able to get past this hurdle in her heart. After all, she was such a carefree woman. However, facing him, she couldn't convince herself to ignore and forget him. Thinking about it, she would feel terrible and suffocated. He gently patted her back and said mildly, "Are you that greedy?" Han Yunxi replied sadly, yes, unfortunately. I can't be greedy anymore. Long Fei wanted to laugh, but his heart ached at the same time. He'd never seen Han Yunxi so despondent before. He buried his head by her ear and was practically biting it as he said word by word, Han Yunxi, remember this. This prince will only have you in this lifetime. This prince will only serve you, no matter if it's in the past or in the future. There will only be you and no one else. As he spoke, he was about to back away, but he closed in again. He held her face in his hands domineeringly and planted a fierce kiss on her lips. This was their exclusive way of sealing a contract. Han Yunxi's entire world lit up. She was no longer cautious and was almost instantly full of vigor. She regained her original carefree and uninhibited nature, daring to love and hate. She pressed Long Fei Ye's face with both hands and began to ask for details. What did your master order you to do previously? I don't remember. Long Fei Yi was telling the truth. How could he remember such a thing? Think about it. Han Yunxi's heart was itching. If she didn't ask clearly, she wouldn't be able to sleep. It's about the same as in that letter. Long Fei Yi really didn't want to think about it. After confirming that he had really forgotten, Han Yunxi was very satisfied. It's good that you've forgotten. After hearing these words, Long Fei Yi suddenly realized that this woman had set a trap for him. If he had really remembered something just now, the consequences would have been very serious. Then how did you reject it? Han Yunxi continued to ask. I obeyed in public but opposed in private. He had never disobeyed any orders in front of his master, but in private, he rarely obeyed orders. For example, when his master ordered him to take care of Duanmu Yao until she turned 18, his care was only to ensure that she didn't die. Didn't Duanmu Yao complain? Han Yunxi was puzzled. Long Fei Yi shook his head. Han Yunxi asked again, why? I don't know. Long Fei Yi was getting impatient. Han Yunxi knew when to stop and didn't pursue the matter. She was more concerned about another matter. Why does Elder Kenzo dote on Duanmu Yao so much? It's not just because of her talent, right? In terms of talent and level of martial arts, Long Fei Yi was miles ahead of Duanmu Yao. Elder Kenzo should dote on Long Fei Yi more. Why would he order Long Fei Yi to serve Duanmu Yao? There must be a secret behind this. There were many things that Long Fei Yi wanted to tell Han Yunxi when they went to Sky Mountain. Now that she had asked, he didn't intend to hide it any longer. He had already steeled his heart to take her to Sky Mountain, so there was nothing to hide. Duanmu Yao's talent is very similar to my late Shirmu's. Shirmu was also Master's disciple. Long Fei Yi sighed. She was Master's first disciple. It's just that this isn't known to the public. Master didn't accept any disciples because of Shirmu's wife. Duanmu Yao and I went to Sky Mountain together. That day, Elder Kenzo was in a good mood because of Duanmu Yao and even accepted me as his disciple. Han Yunxi was very surprised. The outside world had always said that Long Fei Yi and Duanmu Yao were exceptionally talented, so Elder Kenzo made an exception and accepted them as his disciples. She hadn't expected the truth to be like this. In other words, it was all thanks to Duanmu Yao that Long Fei Yi had joined Tianshan Kenzo. Duanmu Yao doesn't know about this herself. Master only told me. This has to do with his reputation. Before Long Fei Yi could finish, Han Yunxi said, don't worry, it'll be kept a secret. Although Cloud Realm Continent's culture was more civilized, the world didn't tolerate master and disciple relationships. Elder Kenzo was a man of virtue and prestige, so he would never do something so immoral. Once news of this got out, it wouldn't just destroy Elder Kenzo's reputation, but all of Sky Mountain itself. No one would dare to send their children up the mountain then. Shirmu's wife, died from qi deviation due to the reverse flow of true qi. Long Feiyi said. After Shermu's wife passed away, Master's hair turned white overnight and he lost his mind. A few years ago, he was still under control, but over the past few years, he's fluctuated between good and bad. When he fell ill, he wouldn't even recognize me, only Duanmu Yao. Han Yunxi was stunned. She knew Long Feiyi had been hiding something from her about Sky Mountain, but never expected it to be something like this. From what she understood, Elder Kenzo's hair had turned white overnight 30 years ago because of his cultivation. She never expected him to be hurt so tragically because of love. How heartbroken must his heart be if his hair turned white overnight? In a flash, Han Yunxi's anger and complaints towards Elder Kenzo vanished. Long Feiyi didn't need to explain. She could understand why Elder Kenzo treated Duanmu Yao so well. Does Zhang Qiuzi know about this? Han Yunxi asked. Master treats Duanmu Yao well. He suspected it before, but he doesn't know the truth. Long Feiyi said. Tang Zijin and Tang Li aren't clear on the matter. Only you, me, and Duanmu Yao know. Once you're on Sky Mountain, pretend you don't know anything. Elder Kenzo wasn't completely insane, but only had occasional relapses. He had once warned him and Duanmu Yao not to tell anyone about this. Long Feiyi had sent Tang Li to Sky Mountain multiple times to gather information, but he'd only gotten general information. Elder Kenzo's subordinates were all tight-lipped, so it was impossible to find out anything about him. Even Duanmu Yao only knew that the sword sect master had gone mad. As for why he had gone mad, she didn't know the truth. Telling Han Yunxi was an exception. Leaving aside Zhang Qiuzi and the other members of Sky Mountain, Carefree City and the City of Daughters had been restless over the past few years. All sorts of factions were vying for control of Cloud Realm Continent's martial arts circles. Elder Kenzo was the true pillar of Sky Mountain. If anything happened to him, the martial arts circles would fall into chaos. After all, chaos in the martial arts circles would be no less disastrous than a war between nations. Han Yunxi understood and said, "It looks like we'll have to deal with Zhang Qiuzi properly when we get to Sky Mountain this time." With the martial arts circles restless, Sky Mountain couldn't afford to fall into chaos on its own. Long Feiyi rubbed her nose with a smile. You don't need to worry. Restrain yourself a little when the time comes so you don't anger Master. Don't worry, I'll yield to him. Han Yunxi agreed. She knew it was hard to avoid running into Duanmu Yao then. As long as the girl didn't push things too far, she wouldn't fuss. Han Yunxi hadn't underestimated Duanmu Yao, but Elder Kenzo's ability to spoil people. She'd probably regret it then. Long Feiyi didn't care about any of that, but a complicated look flickered past his eyes. Dealing with Zhang Qiuzi was secondary to undoing the seal in his body this summer. Should he tell Han Yunxi about this? Chapter 648. The matter of the seal was a long story and involved many people. Long Feiyi had been forced to remove the seal in the abyss of the medicine-requesting cave. Although he had saved Gu Beiyue, he had suffered internal injuries. He had only just recovered a few days ago. Han Yunxi knew nothing about this matter. As for whether Gu Beiyue had noticed, she wasn't sure. However, Gu Beiyue was a smart person. Even if he had noticed, he might not have asked. The seal on Long Feiyi's body was called the Love-Devouring Seal. It had been placed on him 2 years after he had become Kenzo's disciple. Tian Shan Kenzo had countless sword techniques, but only one set of internal strength techniques. It was called the Nirvana Mantra. Anyone who practiced the Tian Shan sword techniques had to practice the Nirvana Mantra. Anyone who practiced the Nirvana Mantra had to accept a seal to permanently seal away the negative qi in their body. When Long Feiyi had first joined the sect, Kenzo had placed a seal on him to seal away the negative qi in his body. Then, he had begun to teach him how to cultivate internal strength. Long Fei Yi was extremely talented and diligent. In just 1 year, he had completed 50% of his internal strength, setting a new record in Tianshan Kenzo. However, one day, when he was learning sword techniques from Kenzo, the seal on his body was suddenly broken. The internal strength he had cultivated for a year leaked out and disappeared. Kenzo was shocked and continued to place a seal on Long Fei Yi. Unfortunately, the seal was still broken a year later. Long Fei Yi had wasted another year of his cultivation. Kenzo didn't understand why either. All he knew was that Long Fei Yi wasn't suited to practice the Nirvana mantra. Once he couldn't practice the Nirvana mantra, he was destined to be unable to practice sword techniques. In other words, Long Fei Yi had no reason to stay in Tianshan Kenzo. It wasn't easy for her to become Kenzo's disciple. Moreover, it was a closed-door disciple. How could Tang Yuan miss this opportunity? She secretly hoped that her son would one day become the successor of Tianshan Kenzo and take control of Wulin. Tang Yuan told Elder Kenzo about Long Fei Yi's past and took out the East Qin imperial family's love-devouring seal, which had never been used before. She begged Elder Kenzo to use it to seal Long Fei Yi. The Lustbite seal was the most precious treasure of the East Qin imperial family. Only those with limitless internal strength could activate it. Anyone who was sealed by this seal would be able to gather qi into strength. Outside of the body's true qi, all the unrighteous qi would form a powerful force called the Lustbite force. The Lustbite power was an evil power. If one couldn't control it, one would suffer from qi deviation. No one knew if it was serious. However, this power would always be sealed under the Lustbite seal. Unless the seal was removed, it would be impossible to use it. When Elder Kenzo placed the seal on Long Fei Yi's body, he had spent a lot of effort to give him 3 chances to remove the seal on his own. Moreover, these chances were temporary. A price had to be paid to remove the seal, and each time the price was greater than the last. That time at Medicine Requesting Cave was Long Fei Yi's first time removing the seal on his own. It had to be said that the price had been steep. Removing the seal required the person who'd placed it. In this world, only Elder Kenzo could undo Long Fei Yi's love-devouring seal. Kenzo had once said that Long Fei Yi would never remove the seal unless he could fully control the Lustbite force. The Lustbite seal had a taboo rule: its user had to be a virgin. Otherwise, the seal would self-destruct and the Lustbite force would vanish within 3 days. After being injured by Zhangqiuzi last time, Long Fei Yi's internal energy had not only recovered, but improved with each passing day. He was confident that he could control the Lustbite force. His trip to Celestial Mountain this time wasn't just to fulfill his promise to Han Yunxi. According to his plans, he was supposed to head to Celestial Mountain after stabilizing the western regions. This year, Elder Kenzo had gone into closed-door cultivation frequently while Zhangqiuzi had turned Tianshan Kenzo into a foul atmosphere. Moreover, he'd sent people to investigate Elder Kenzo's daily life multiple times, as if he suspected something. It was time for Long Fei Yi to get involved in Celestial Mountain's internal affairs. He needed the Lustbite force to deal with Zhangqiuzi and his accomplices. How was he supposed to explain this to Han Yunxi? How much could he explain? Long Fei Yi was still hesitating when the driver called from outside. "Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, please go upstairs for dinner." The driver was a dutiful servant, but he was worried about his master's stomachs. If this dragged on any longer, they might as well eat dinner instead. "Let's get off the carriage." Long Fei Yi stopped hesitating. One day, he'd take this woman to pay respects to Imperial Father and Mu Fei. Then he'd tell her everything about East Qin, including the past she'd never been a part of. While other couples quarreled at the head of the bed and made up at the end, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi quarreled and made up in the carriage. When Han Yunxi saw the delicious vinegar cabbage on the table upstairs, she almost laughed out loud. Long Feiyi, on the other hand, was very calm. He gave the driver a cold glance without a word. The driver had no idea where he'd gone wrong, so he didn't dare to ask His Highness Duke of Qin. Instead, he cautiously asked Han Yunxi, "Esteemed Wang Fei, shall we begin to order?" Han Yunxi said, "No need. Just bring the rice and a pot of tea." The driver was even more puzzled. He snuck a glance at His Highness Duke of Qin and saw that he didn't have any objections, so he did as he was told. Just like that, Han Yunxi and Long Fei ended up in the most expensive private room of the most expensive restaurant in the county. They ate a meal of white rice paired with vinegar-stewed cabbage. The driver uncle who couldn't figure it out peeked in from outside the door and saw that His Highness Duke of Qin didn't move his chopsticks much. It seemed like he didn't like sour food, but esteemed Wang Fei kept forcing him to eat. Multiple times, she put food in his mouth, but he still obediently ate. It had to be said that the driver almost didn't recognize His Highness Duke of Qin after seeing this scene. Who would have thought that Cloud Realm Continent's coldest monarch would dote on his wife so much? He was completely at her mercy. A meal of vinegar cabbage made Han Yunxi forget all her unhappiness. On the way back to Yaoshuwei, she slept peacefully in Long Fei Ye's arms while cultivating the second level of the poison storage space. A few days later, they arrived at a side courtyard in Yaoshuwei and were surprised to see Duanmu Yao sitting by herself on the front steps. She seemed to be waiting for them to come back. How did she find this place? What was she doing here? Duanmu Yao was dressed in a spotless white muslin gown with a bright red waistcoat. Her entire person emanated an indescribable air of immortality. She sat there hugging her knees, looking both lovely and pitiful. Anyone who saw her would stop to take a second look. Long Fei glanced at her with a hint of impatience in his eyes. Han Yunxi's face turned black as she glared at Long Fei. She knows about this side courtyard too. Long Fei's side courtyards were spread all over the world, but not everyone knew about them. Someone must have leaked the information. Have Chu Shifeng look into it later, Long Fei said. Now Han Yunxi grew serious. Could it be, there's a spy? Who could have known about the side courtyard in Yaoshuwei and leaked the information to Duanmu Yao? Go to the northern suburbs. Send someone to pick up Gu Beiyue, Long Fei said. Long Fei had another estate in the northern suburbs, so Han Yunxi decided to have Duanmu Yao wait here. The driver was about to turn around when someone suddenly shouted from behind. Han Yunxi, are you in the carriage? Old uncle, esteemed Wang Fei is in the carriage, right? This voice, it's so familiar. Han Yunxi didn't even need to look to know that it was Mu Linger. Truly, an awn had fallen into the eye of a needle, what a coincidence. That damned girl couldn't have arrived earlier or later, but now of all times. If Han Yunxi remembered correctly, this wasn't the first time Mu Ling had ruined her plans. If Mu Ling wasn't Han Yunxi's cousin, what would have happened to her? Suspense. Han Yunxi peeked through the window and saw that Duanmu Yao had already stood up and was walking over. Mu Ling was riding a horse alone and had just arrived. When she saw Long Fei's carriage, her attention was completely focused on it, so she hadn't noticed Duanmu Yao standing at the gate. Han Yunxi and Long Fei didn't say anything. The driver smiled and said, Miss Ling, His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei aren't in the carriage. They haven't come back yet. Then Gu. Mu Ling almost blurted out the name Gu, but she stopped herself in time. Then what about Gu Beiyue? Is he here? Without waiting for the driver to reply, she asked, also, is Old Man Pill Fiend here? The driver was anxious to help his master get rid of the trouble, so he nodded. They're all here, they're all here. Quickly go in. This old servant still has matters to attend to, so I'm in a hurry to leave. Mu Ling was in a hurry to find the Chi brother she'd been thinking about day and night, but when she turned around, she was shocked to see Duan Muyao standing there. Duan Muyao's figure flashed to the front of the carriage. She smiled. Uncle Gao, are you going to pick up my senior brother? Miss Duanmu, what are you doing here? Uncle Gao was the first to see Duan Muyao, but he feigned shock. He'd served His Highness Duke of Qin for many years and had traveled extensively with him. Naturally, he understood this junior sister of his well. I have an urgent matter to discuss with my senior brother. If you're going to pick him up, I'll go with you. Duan Muyao prepared to board the carriage. Uncle Gao hurriedly stopped her. No, no. His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei are out and not in Yaoshui. This old servant is in a hurry to see a vet. These 4 horses are all sick. Mu Ling was gullible, but Duan Muyao wasn't. She looked at the 4 horses and couldn't see anything wrong with them. She was determined to believe that Uncle Gao was going to pick up Duan Muyao. If her senior brother hadn't needed the carriage, Uncle Gao wouldn't have casually taken it out. After all, this carriage was her senior brother's favorite and he'd never let anyone touch it. Even she, who'd been his junior sister for so many years, had taken many carriages with him. She'd also taken many of the Duke of Qin's private carriages, but she'd never taken this one. In truth, she didn't have to make things difficult for Uncle Gao. She could have just followed him in secret and found her senior brother. But she didn't want to miss this opportunity. She wanted to sit in this carriage, lean against the high pillow he always leaned on, taste the black tea he drank every day, and feel his scent. It had been far too long since she'd seen him. She missed his appearance and his voice so much that she was about to go crazy. Where's the vet? Duan Muyao asked seriously. In the south of the city, Uncle Gao replied offhandedly. I happen to be heading south as well. Give me a ride. Duan Muyao wanted to board the carriage again. The driver tried to stop her, but Duan Muyao discreetly pushed his hand away. Mu Ling wanted to stop her as well, but Duan Muyao suddenly jumped into the carriage and lifted the curtains. She was stunned. Because inside the carriage. Chapter 649. The moment Duan Muyao lifted the curtains, she was so shocked that she couldn't make a sound. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't move her eyes away. It was as if she had been petrified, standing motionless in front of the carriage. Her hands were tightly gripping the curtains. Uncle Gao glanced into the carriage, then immediately turned back. His expression was one of amazement. Although he had heard about it before, this was the first time he had seen it with his own eyes. Reality proved that there was a huge difference between seeing with one's own eyes and hearing with one's own ears. Mu Linger had wanted to pull Duan Muyao down, but when she saw the situation, she walked over suspiciously. She took a look, then immediately turned back like Uncle Gao. Her face instantly turned red, and she didn't know what to do. Heavens, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were in the carriage. Heavens, the 2 of them were actually kissing. Heavens, Duan Muyao had already lifted the curtains, but they were still kissing so passionately, so selflessly. Long Fei Yi was casually leaning back on the high pillow, Han Yunxi's entire body pressed against his. Her arms were wrapped around his neck, and his arms were wrapped around her waist. The 2 of them were so close together. As they kissed, Long Fei Yi actually lifted his slender legs and wrapped them around Han Yunxi's legs, completely trapping her on his body. Duan Muyao witnessed this scene with her own eyes. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart being flung to the ground, shattering into pieces. How could this be? How could this be? How could she forget such a scene? She wouldn't be able to forget it for the rest of her life. She couldn't see Han Yunxi's expression, but she could see Long Fei Ye's lowered eyelids as he kissed Han Yunxi in a delirious frenzy. Greed, infatuation, passion, and unable to stop. His chiseled face, his handsome features, his natural domineering aura, and his manly wildness in the midst of delirium. It was hard to imagine what it would feel like to be under his delights. At this very moment, wasn't Han Yunxi bearing all of his weight? His dominance, his wildness. Only God knew how intense his kiss was. Han Yunxi made muffled sounds, as if she was protesting, but also as if she was satisfied. He liked the sound of her voice and deepened the kiss. But to Duan Muyao's ears, that ambiguous sound was ear-piercing. Her hands were trembling, her heart was trembling, and her entire body was trembling. She knew that she couldn't continue watching, or she would definitely go crazy. However, she couldn't take her eyes off her. She was afraid that she would miss it. She was afraid that she didn't know how much love and affection Han Yunxi had received from Long Fei Yi. Why? Why did Han Yunxi get it? What was so good about Han Yunxi? What does Long Fei Yi like about Han Yunxi? She would learn and imitate, wouldn't that work? Was it too late? Duan Muyao was about to go crazy from jealousy. As Han Yunxi's muffled sounds grew louder, Long Fei Yi let go of her long legs first before releasing her cherry lips. He didn't say anything, but kept his eyes on Han Yunxi, completely ignoring Duan Muyao, who was standing at the side. He had never liked to bother with such troublesome matters. When he encountered one, he would just walk away. However, Han Yunxi questioned him, "Why should I avoid her? Are you afraid of her?" Han Yunxi was about to get out of the car, but Duan Muyao lifted the curtain first. Hence, Han Yunxi turned around and leaned on him, kissing him so passionately that he didn't want to stop. Han Yunxi was really frightened by the kiss. She was almost out of breath. She lay on Long Fei Ye's chest, gasping for air. Duan Muyao stood at the side, tears streaming down her cheeks. Just as she was about to speak, Long Fei Yi suddenly turned around and pressed Han Yunxi under his body. He supported himself with one hand on the bed, while the other trailed down her waist. His tall, refined body was above her, and his slender back, full of strength, was enough to make one's imagination run wild. No. Han Yunxi couldn't help but cry out. No, no. Senior brother, you. Duan Muyao finally burst into tears. She was about to rush in when Long Fei Yi angrily waved his hand. Scram! Only the heavens knew how displeased Long Fei Yi was to be disturbed. He had long forgotten that there was someone beside him and was completely immersed in the moment. His wave of his hand caused Duan Muyao to fall off the carriage to the side. When the curtain fell, Han Yunxi finally burst into laughter. After so many battles with Duan Muyao, this seemed to be the most enjoyable. She didn't need to use her hands, nor did she need to use her brain. There was no way Duan Muyao was competing with her for a man. Han Yunxi was truly wicked. Just as she was rejoicing that her evil scheme had succeeded, Long Fei Yi unexpectedly didn't laugh. He continued with his eyes lowered. His hand had already brushed past the base of her large buttocks. Through the material of her clothes, the strange feeling of caressing her made Han Yunxi quiver and her entire body tense. What was he trying to do? She was putting on an act, but he was very serious. His face was silent, and there was a bottomless darkness hidden in his eyes. Han Yunxi could clearly feel the heat coming from his lower abdomen. She finally realized that she had accidentally ignited a fire, and the fire was very big. She didn't reject him, but rather looked forward to it. He was her husband, after all. This was something she could openly admit. But this wasn't the right place. Not to mention the fact that this wasn't the right place, there were still people waiting outside. Long Fei Ye's hand was about to enter when Han Yunxi anxiously pulled him back. If she didn't stop him now, she didn't know if she would be able to calm down. Long Fei Yi, she said coquettishly. What are you doing? His hoarse voice had a hint of displeasure. You. She didn't know what to say. In the end, she whispered in his ear, Don't what? He pressed, his voice frighteningly deep. You're naughty. Han Yunxi suddenly pulled his hand. Long Fei Yi seemed to have sobered up a little. His other hand was also on the bed, trapping her between his two hands. He frowned and looked at her. Who's naughty? Say it clearly. This time, she was really embarrassed. You. It's you. She covered her face and turned to the side. He slowly moved closer and kissed his way down her face and neck, deliberately tickling her. She wasn't afraid and shivered. She really couldn't stand it. All right. She was still speaking softly at first, but as he kissed his way down and rubbed his way down her arm to the softness in front of her body, she really couldn't take it anymore and shouted, All right. Long Fei, that's enough. Don't. Long Fei Yi, that's enough. Don't. I don't want it. Go away. Long Fei Yi, I beg you. Long Fei Yi, you're naughty. Outside the carriage, Uncle Gao had already gone to wait in the distance. Mu Ling, the naive little girl, was already blushing as red as a monkey's butt. She had her back to the carriage and was covering her ears, but she couldn't help but eavesdrop. As for Duan Muyao, she was sitting beside the carriage, tears streaming down her face. She was in a sorry state. She raised her head to look at the tightly drawn carriage and listened to Han Yunxi's soft gasps of laughter. Her face was as pale as a corpse. She hated Han Yunxi to the core. She hated everything that had happened today, but she couldn't wait to find out how naughty he could be. How naughty! The senior she had admired since she was young, the reserved and taciturn senior, how could he be naughty? How could it be? Sob, Duan Muyao began to sob softly. What could be more devastating than this? Why? Why was it that at this moment, even she herself felt so lowly, so defeated, so pitiful? Long Fei Yi, why are you treating me like this? Why? The coquettish cries and laughter continued in the carriage. Towards the end, even Long Fei Ye's laughter could be heard. Duan Muyao was dumbfounded. She sat motionless on the ground. Those who didn't know better would think that she was crazy. After a long while, Long Fei Yi finally finished punishing Han Yunxi. Actually, the two of them didn't do anything. They only played for a while. Han Yunxi's entire body was tickled by Long Fei Yi. It was a lesson that left a deep impression. At this moment, she was lying on her back, gasping for breath. Long Fei Yi was sprawled on top of her. Get up, she urged. His weight wasn't light. Even though he didn't put all his weight on her, she still couldn't bear it. Let me lie down for a while. Be good. Long Fei Ye's voice was gentle, unlike his earlier ferocious state. Han Yunxi's heart softened so easily when it came to him. She gently stroked his back and realized that it was drenched in sweat. She couldn't help but chuckle. What are you laughing at? He asked. You're sweating just like that, she said frankly. What she meant was, Long Fei Yi propped himself up and looked at her seriously with furrowed brows. Just how bad are you? Han Yunxi felt very innocent. She naturally thought that way. She couldn't be blamed. She retorted, How am I bad? What are you thinking about again? Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi lowered his head and bit her ear, whispering, When this prince has some free time, he will know just how bad you are. Finally, Han Yunxi's ears started to heat up. Before long, her ears and face were completely red. Of course, she knew what he meant. So, he was thinking the same thing. By the time Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were done tidying up and sitting down, half an incense stick had already passed. They didn't get off the carriage and ignored Duan Muyao even more. Long Fei Yi said, "Uncle Gao, why aren't we leaving?" Uncle Gao hurried over to drive the carriage. At this time, Duan Muyao finally recovered from her grief and despair. She suddenly stood up and spread her arms in front of the carriage to stop it. If she couldn't have it, then Han Yunxi shouldn't think about getting it either. Even if she got it, she wanted Han Yunxi to lose it. "Senior brother, Master told me to look for you. Have you received his letter?" Duan Muyao asked loudly. "It's useless. This prince has no time." "Scram!" Long Fei Yi said impatiently. Previously, he still had some camaraderie between fellow disciples, but after Duan Muyao colluded with Jun Yixia, he couldn't be bothered to be courteous with her. "Senior brother, I've brought Master's letter." Duan Muyao took out a letter. It was indeed written by Elder Kenzo himself. When she found out that Master couldn't get in touch with Senior brother, she told Master that she could find Senior brother herself and have him give the letter to her. Master treated Senior brother like a father. Senior brother had never disobeyed any of Master's orders since he was young. She didn't believe that Senior brother would disobey Master's orders for a woman. "Uncle Gao," Long Fei Yi said. Uncle Gao quickly reached for the letter, but Duan Muyao wouldn't give it to him. "Master said that I have to give it to you personally and that you have to read it on the spot." Han Yunxi felt like she was going to be defeated by Duan Muyao's shamelessness. She didn't need to guess to know that the letter in Duan Muyao's hand was one of the 3 must-haves that Elder Kenzo had mentioned. Long Fei Yi was about to speak when she stopped him and got off the carriage. Chapter 650. Long Fei Yi didn't like to waste words, much less waste time with irrelevant people. Although Duan Muyao held a lot of weight in the sword sect master's eyes and had considerable influence on Zhangqiuzi's side, Long Fei still didn't place her in his eyes. If he wanted to meddle in Celestial Mountain's affairs, he didn't need Duan Muyao's face. He didn't need her help, nor did he fear her interference. He was going to order someone to snatch the letter and leave, but he didn't say anything when he saw Han Yunxi get off the carriage. Instead, he quietly drank tea and took out the annals of the 7 noble families to study. If Han Yunxi liked to play, he'd let her be. If she went overboard, he'd clean up the mess for her. As soon as Han Yunxi got off the carriage, Uncle Gao withdrew. Duan Muyao assumed that Long Fei Yi would get off the carriage, but Han Yunxi got off alone. She felt disappointed and quickly wiped away her tears, not wanting Han Yunxi to see her in such a sorry state. Unfortunately, she could wipe away her tears, but the same couldn't be said for her disheveled state. Han Yunxi had already jumped off the carriage, but she sat back down and leaned lazily against the door frame, toying with the horsewhip in her hand. She didn't look at Duan Muyao directly, but studied her from the side. Han Yunxi's gaze first rested on Duan Muyao's feet, then slowly moved up and down her face. It was a standard look of contempt, full of disdain and disdain. Duan Muyao found it an eyesore. Duan Muyao was already feeling a little guilty, so Han Yunxi's scrutiny turned her shame into anger. "Han Yunxi, what are you looking at?" "I'm looking at what a clingy person looks like," Han Yunxi said, before examining Duan Muyao from head to toe. "Now you can see clearly." "You!" Duan Muyao was so angry that she almost attacked, but held back in the end. Since Han Yunxi dared to get out of the car, she must make her regret it for the rest of her life. Although Master didn't know about Zhangqiuzi's marriage with the Tang clan, he did know that she'd come looking for Senior brother to treat her injuries. No matter what, she couldn't make a move. Neither could her words or actions be in the wrong. She couldn't leave any evidence that could be used against her. She had to let Han Yunxi be in the wrong so that she could complain. So what if Han Yunxi was Senior Marshal Brother's official wife? Once she gave Master a bad impression, she would have no chance. One had to know that with his master's temper, once he didn't like someone, he would hate them to the core. There was no way he could change his mind. Duanmu Yao ignored Han Yunxi's humiliation and ignored her as a person. She said loudly, "Senior brother, are you going to disobey Master's orders? If you don't want to read this letter, I'll leave. I'll bring the letter back to Master later." It wasn't clear whether Long Feiyi heard her, but he was currently leaning lazily against a high pillow as he flipped through the pages of the annals of the 7 noble families. Han Yunxi grew angry as she narrowed her eyes at Duanmu Yao. This woman is obviously using the old Kenzo to threaten Long Feiyi. Who said Long Feiyi doesn't want to read this letter? You're the one who won't give it to him. Miss Duanmu, aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning for lying in broad daylight? Han Yunxi coldly asked. She's cursing me again. Duanmu Yao's rage boiled in her organs. She wanted nothing more than to curse her back, but for the sake of filing a complaint and not leaving any evidence behind, she held back. She took a deep breath before asking, Han Yunxi, you're a woman. Can't you talk things out properly? Why must you curse people? Han Yunxi smiled and tilted her head to ask the driver, did this princess consort curse people? Uncle Gao immediately shook his head. Han Yunxi then looked at Mu Linger, but before she could speak, Mu Linger ran over and asked, Han Yunxi, are you cursing people? Han Yunxi was very satisfied and said to Uncle Gao, here, you should learn more from Miss Linger in the future. Inside the carriage, Long Feiyi was focused on the biography. His lips silently curved upwards. In the end, he still paid attention to her every word and action. Duanmu Yao was so angry that she almost cried. She couldn't hold it in any longer and cursed, Han Yunxi, you're the one who's not human. Don't go too far. You have no right to interfere in the matters between me and my senior brother. Get out of this princess way right now. This princess. It had to be said that Duanmu Yao's tone and arrogant expression were nothing like the princess of a large country. Instead, she was more like a spoiled little princess from a small country. Whether it was the eldest princess or the little princess, she had long lost her noble status. If this princess consort remembers correctly, you've already been banished from the Western Zhou imperial family. You colluded with the prince of Western Zhou's enemy, which is tantamount to treason. Duanmu Yao, you don't even have the most basic principles of being a person. You don't even have the basic responsibilities of a child. Don't you feel embarrassed when you mention the word princess? Han Yunxi lectured seriously, a noble status is both an honor and a responsibility. It's not something to be flaunted, it's something to be protected with all your might. Duanmu Yao, if you're still human, you should hurry up and bury your mother. Han Yunxi didn't casually curse Duanmu Yao as not human. She would never use such vulgar words casually. Empress Shui had been kidnapped, then assassinated in the Chu clan barracks. Because Duanmu Yao didn't believe in the assassination, she used Celestial Mountain's influence to pressure the Chu clan and Ning Qing into investigating the matter. Thus, Empress Shui's body was still lying in the Chu clan barracks, unable to be buried. Long Feiyi had sent men to assassinate her. From Long Feiyi's standpoint, it didn't count for much. In the conflicts of the world, a general success was built on the bones of 10,000 men. There was no such thing as a power struggle that didn't involve sacrifice or bloodshed. But Duanmu Yao was Empress Shui's own daughter. From her standpoint, Empress Shui's death was tragic. She should be more anxious than anyone to find out the truth and bury her mother in peace. But not only did she have the time to meddle in Sangqiuzi's affairs with the Tang clan, but she even had the time to block Long Fei Ye's carriage and fight over his affections. Han Yunxi wasn't insulting her by calling her not human. Duanmu Yao's soft spot had been jabbed, and her heart felt like it had been kicked. She'd lost her status as princess and the mother who doted on her most. How could she lose her senior brother as well? She wasn't stupid and knew his ambitions. One day, Celestial Mountain would be his. Master was old and would retire into seclusion eventually. If she lost him as well, she'd be left with nothing. You don't need to meddle in Western Zhou's internal affairs. Han Yunxi, who do you think you are? So what if I lose my status as a princess? I'm still better than you. What right do you have to criticize my birth as a mere daughter of the first wife? Duanmu Yao demanded. How would Duanmu Yao feel if Han Yunxi's origins were exposed one day? Han Yunxi was too lazy to comment on Duanmu Yao's origins. Cold laughter rang out. Duanmu Yao, this Wang Fei has no interest in your affairs. I only want to tell you, a good dog doesn't block the way. Scram. Duanmu Yao was cursing her with every sentence. Han Yunxi, you're the dog. Duanmu Yao raged. Are you going to scram or not? Han Yunxi grew impatient. Senior brother, are you sure you don't want this letter? Senior brother, I'm injured. Master asked you to treat me. Duanmu Yao decided to reveal the contents of the letter. She waited for Han Yunxi to reply on Long Fei Ye's behalf. As soon as Han Yunxi said no, she'd leave immediately. She'd write a letter to complain that Han Yunxi was blocking her senior brother and that Han Yunxi wanted to kill her. Han Yunxi wouldn't fall for her trap so easily. She jumped off the carriage and walked up to Duanmu Yao. Of course he wants it. Give it to me. Master said that it must be given to senior brother himself. Han Yunxi, you don't have the right to touch my master's letter. Duanmu Yao said coldly. I'm Long Fei Ye's official consort. If I don't have the right, do you? Are you going to give it to me or not? Han Yunxi's voice was gloomy as she issued an ultimatum. No. Duanmu Yao blurted out. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed craftily before she ordered. Duanmu Yao secretly took Kenzo's letter. Someone come, steal it for this Wang Fei. Duanmu Yao gave a start. She was clearly plotting against Han Yunxi, so why was she being accused of such a huge crime? Before Duanmu Yao could retort, Chu Shifeng led a group of men to surround them. He was an experienced man and didn't waste words before attacking. Of course, he couldn't beat Duanmu Yao alone, but he'd brought 10 shadow guards with him to protect His Highness from the shadows. Even if they couldn't beat Duanmu Yao, they could still steal the letter from her hands. With Chu Shifeng and 11 shadow guards attacking at the same time, Duanmu Yao had to defend herself even if she didn't want to fight. Soon enough, she was embroiled in a melee. Han Yunxi sat back in her carriage. She could play with Duanmu Yao with her needles now, but she hadn't done so in the past. She had to prevent Duanmu Yao from tattling to Kenzo. Although she wouldn't try to curry favor with Kenzo on purpose, she couldn't afford to offend the man, much less give Duanmu Yao something to use against her. Kenzo was Long Fei Ye's master, after all. She hated seeing Long Fei Ye in a difficult position. Han Yunxi watched the fight with narrowed eyes, lost in thought. At this moment, someone suddenly handed her a cup of tea. The people inside didn't speak, and neither did Han Yunxi. She only smiled soundlessly as she accepted the tea and slowly sipped it. Tea personally brewed by His Highness Duke of Qin was truly delicious. With great difficulty, Duanmu Yao finally found an opportunity to divert her attention and look over. Just in time to see this scene, she suddenly forgot to resist and stopped her sword to stare blankly. Seeing this, Chu Shifeng rushed over to snatch the letter, giving Duanmu Yao a fright. She stuffed the letter into her robes and threw caution to the wind. Glaring hatefully at Han Yunxi, she said, "I'm not giving it." "Han Yunxi, if you have the skills, come and take it." Chu Shifeng was floored by the sight. How am I supposed to snatch it from her? Duanmu Yao was certain that Chu Shifeng and the rest wouldn't dare to touch her. Only Han Yunxi could. She hadn't trained her swordsmanship for nothing after all. Even when facing off against 11 shadow guards at once, Han Yunxi still couldn't get close to her. Chu Shifeng looked at Han Yunxi awkwardly, unsure of what to do. Han Yunxi slowly finished her tea and grinned. "Ling go." Her smile was full of meaning, but it wasn't clear whether Mu Ling understood. Chapter 651. It wasn't clear whether Mu Ling understood the deeper meaning in Han Yunxi's eyes, but she returned Han Yunxi's mischievous grin. Then she joined Chu Shifeng and the rest and said loudly, "All of you, cover me." "Mu Ling, this has nothing to do with you. Get out of the way." Duanmu Yao panicked. Why didn't she realize there was another Mu Ling by her side? Han Yunxi's my boss, so her business is my business. Mu Ling was not only self-righteous, but even copied Duanmu Yao's overbearing attitude. "Duanmu Yao, this lady will give you a chance. Be a good girl and hand over that letter, or else," she didn't finish, but chuckled. Just like Han Yunxi's smile, it was full of deep meaning. Seeing this, Han Yunxi stopped worrying. She knew that Mu Ling understood. Meddling in other people's business, you're seeking death. Duanmu Yao raised her sword and made a beautiful slash before pointing it at Mu Ling. She looked fearless, but her heart was filled with anxiety. She could handle 11 Shadow Guard experts and Han Yunxi with ease, but Mu Ling was a different story. "Chu Shifeng, what are you waiting for?" As soon as Mu Ling finished speaking, Chu Shifeng and the 10 Shadow Guard rushed forward to surround Duanmu Yao. Duanmu Yao defended herself as she shouted, "You men have the nerve to gang up on a single woman like me? Be a good girl and hand over the letter. I promise no one's going to bully you." Mu Ling laughed disdainfully. She stood on one side, waiting for a chance to strike. Of course Duanmu Yao knew that Mu Ling was waiting for a chance, so she had to split her attention to guard against Mu Ling. But as soon as she did, Chu Shifeng's group closed in, forcing her to use all her strength. After a few rounds, Duanmu Yao and Chu Shifeng's group of 11 Shadow Guard experts were now evenly matched. Chu Shifeng's group couldn't gain the upper hand, but Duanmu Yao couldn't escape either. Duanmu Yao grew more and more worried that Mu Ling would make a move. She viciously blocked Chu Shifeng's attack with her sword, then spun around and drew a circle with her blade. The sharp edge of her blade forced the Shadow Guard back before she could catch her breath and speak. She shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother, I've suffered severe internal injuries. Can you help me treat them?" "Master, this..." She wanted to tell him everything in the letter. She wanted to say that it was the same whether he read the letter or not, and that there was no need for him to take it. She wanted to give herself a way out. But before she could finish, Mu Ling suddenly flew towards her at breakneck speed. Alarmed, Duanmu Yao was about to block when Chu Shifeng and the Shadow Guard flanked her from both sides. The situation was dire. Chu Shifeng and the Shadow Guard's attacks were far more dangerous than Mu Ling's. As a martial arts practitioner, Duanmu Yao instinctively chose to block Chu Shifeng and the Shadow Guard instead of defending against Mu Ling. Unexpectedly, Mu Ling didn't use force as soon as she drew close, but grabbed her by the collar and tugged at her clothes without hesitation. SSS, the sudden voice caused everyone to stop, including Duanmu Yao herself. Beneath her little red waistcoat, a long gash had been ripped open in her white muslin dress. The letter hidden in her bosom had long fallen to the ground, revealing her pale yellow chest wrap. Everyone was stunned. Only Han Yunxi and Mu Ling-er were laughing. Han Yunxi's smile was languid and relaxed, while Mu Ling-er's was sweet and harmless. The two sisters had a tacit understanding. "Ah!" Duan Muyao screamed as soon as she recovered her wits. She clutched at her chest in panic, not knowing what to do. She tried to buckle her waistcoat, but it only covered the top. The torn fabric beneath couldn't cover the rest. She looked around and realized that she was surrounded by men. They were all staring at her. "What are you all looking at? What are you looking at?" She flew into a rage out of humiliation and screamed, "You're not allowed to look. All of you, turn around for this princess. Do you hear me?" Her hands couldn't cover her shame. She didn't have the face to stay. She looked towards the carriage, only to see Han Yunxi looking at her with disdain. The curtains were tightly shut, and the people inside remained unmoved. Grievance, bitterness, unwillingness, and despair all turned into tears, flooding her eyes. "Senior brother, you're heartless, so don't blame me for being unjust. Han Yunxi, Mu Ling-er, Duan Muyao, will repay today's grudge by twofold." She choked with sobs as she shouted, then fiercely sheathed her sword and left in a sorry state. Mu Ling-er didn't take Duan Muyao's warning to heart. She only remembered Duan Muyao's shameless words today. She picked up the letter and threw it at Han Yunxi. "Here. I'm looking for." Mu Ling-er almost said the wrong thing again. She stuck out her tongue and smiled. "I'm going to look for His Excellency Pill Fiend." Han Yunxi took the letter and opened it. Just as she guessed, Elder Kenzo still had 3 must-haves in the letter. She lifted the curtains and saw Long Fei Yi leisurely drinking tea. The annals of the 7 noble families had flipped to the last page, which introduced the Feng clan. She was working hard outside to help him deal with rotten peach blossoms, but he was leisurely drinking tea and reading in the carriage. But this attitude. Han Yunxi found it hard to like. She handed the letter over. "What should we do?" Duan Muyao was easy to dismiss, but Elder Kenzo wasn't. The letter was already delivered to the door, so it wouldn't be right if he didn't take it. Moreover, Duan Muyao had already told him that she might not dare to come again, but she would definitely continue to use Elder Kenzo to pressure Long Fei Yi. It was impossible for Long Fei Yi to feign ignorance. What should she do? She really didn't dare to offend Elder Kenzo. She had no other choice. Long Fei Yi wasn't even willing to touch the letter. He only glanced at it. "Why haven't you thrown away this useless thing? You have a solution." Han Yunxi was overjoyed. "Throw it away." He was a little impatient. Thinking about how Duan Muyao had hidden the letter in front of her chest, Han Yunxi felt disgusted and hurriedly threw it away. "I'll write a letter to Master later and say that I'm at medicine requesting cave asking for medicine. My internal injuries haven't healed, so I can't help even if I want to," Long Fei Yi said calmly. "Will Elder Kenzo believe you?" Han Yunxi was very doubtful. From what she knew, Elder Kenzo only had eyes for one disciple, Duan Muyao. He didn't care about Long Fei Yi at all. "He will. This matter ends here." If Long Fei Yi told Master Kenzo that he'd suffered internal injuries, Master might not believe him. However, Master would definitely believe him if he told him that he'd broken the Lustbite seal. Compared to Duan Muyao's matter, which was more important? As long as his master wasn't crazy, he would still be able to tell. Although Duan Muyao couldn't climb Celestial Mountain right now, Master had connections in the martial arts circles. It wouldn't be difficult for him to find someone who could treat her injuries. He didn't have to be the only one. With Long Fei Yi's words, Han Yunxi stopped worrying. Before entering the room, Long Fei Yi had instructed Chu Shifeng in a low voice to investigate the matter of the traitor. Your Highness, if there's a traitor, I'm afraid it's someone from the Tang clan, Chu Shifeng said seriously. They didn't live in Pill Fiend Pharmacy, nor did they live in the king's mansion. Instead, they lived in a side courtyard in Yaoshui. The servants here were all shadow guards, and the few maidservants were carefully selected and trusted. Chu Shifeng was certain that the problem didn't lie with them. Many members of the Tang clan knew the location of Yaoshui courtyard, so it was possible that they'd leaked the location to Duan Muyao. No matter which side, your lordship wants answers. Long Feiyi said. This subordinate understands. Chu Shifeng obeyed and left. When Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi returned to the courtyard, they saw Mu Ling searching for someone. Han Yunxi shook her head helplessly. Mu Ling, this girl is so stupid. If she doesn't find Gu, he'll be the one to talk to her. Why is she so impatient? Still, there's no such thing as logic when you like someone. Where's Pill Fiend? Wasn't he supposed to be here? Mu Ling asked anxiously. Maybe, he went out. In any case, he'll come back. Why don't you go rest first? Han Yunxi didn't dare to reveal any more information. Gu had already suspected her last time. If she didn't restrain herself now and Gu found out the truth, Mu Ling would definitely be done for. Although Mu Ling had tricked Gu, a lover's heart wasn't a crime. Let her lie. Wasn't she lying to herself as well? Sometimes, the more you lie, the more it becomes true. It'll be a lifetime. Looking at Mu Ling, Han Yunxi's heart was filled with emotions. She knew that even if she spent a lifetime with Mu Ling, and didn't expose Gu's identity, Mu Ling, was willing and able to do it. Mu Ling, wanted to ask more, but when she saw Han Yunxi's meaningful glance, she immediately understood Han Yunxi's taboo. She said indifferently, okay, I'll wait for Senior to come back. Long Feiyi wasn't worried about Gu dealing with Medical City's head elderling. After all, he didn't want to make a move against Medical City. Right now, he was paying attention to Ning Cheng's movements. Originally, he was recuperating in Yaoshui Villa while waiting for Chu Tianyin to surrender. Tang Li's marriage was just an accident. After visiting Gu Beiyue with Han Yunxi, Long Feiyi returned alone. Gu Beiyue had brewed tea and was waiting for him. Any news from Chu Tianyin? Long Feiyi got straight to the point. Gu Beiyue took out a small slip of paper. He sent it here 3 days ago. He asked about Empress Shui. Long Feiyi glanced at it before asking cold, what, does he suspect your lordship? He's just probing. Chu Tianyin already has intentions of surrendering. Within this month, he'll. Gu Beiyue trailed off, then lowered his voice, pushed the blame onto Ning Qing. How are you so sure? Long Feiyi was intrigued. He originally wanted to use Empress Shui's matter to pit Duan Muyao against the Chu clan. That way, Celestial Mountain's strength would directly tie down Ning Qing. If Chu Shifeng wanted to frame Ning Qing, then that would be perfect. Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. That's because this one gave him the idea. Long Feiyi was surprised, but felt that it made sense. He secretly rejoiced that he hadn't made an enemy out of Gu Beiyue. Otherwise, the sickly man might have become his strongest foe. You've been exposed. Before Long Feiyi could finish, Gu Beiyue cut him off. Your Highness, don't worry. This one didn't tell Chu Tianyin that your Highness knew about my identity as a member of the Shadow Clan. He will never know. Long Feiyi still believed Gu Beiyue's words. All right, as long as he brings up Empress Shui's matter, your lordship will accept his surrender. Long Feiyi said. While Long Feiyi was plotting against Ning Qing was also trying to figure out how to use Empress Shui's matter to evade Celestial Mountain's forces and scheme against Long Feiyi. In the West Jing Imperial Palace, he was sitting lazily on the railing of the tallest building, a thin needle in his mouth. It was unclear what he was thinking, but his cold gaze seemed to wander. Chapter 652. The tall building overlooked the entirety of West Liang. Ning Cheng was sitting lazily on the railing, completely unconcerned with the bustling city below him and its myriad of lights. He held a golden needle in his mouth and his gaze was somewhat wandering, as if he was lost in thought. At this time, he was not like when he was in the Bailey Chamber of Commerce, nor was he as cold and mature as when he was in the imperial court. His cold and handsome facial features revealed a hint of evil and cunning, and he was much more lazy. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking, but his lips curved up into a cold smile. It was both playful and disdainful, a complex mix of emotions. What was it that he was playful about, but disdainful of? Probably only he knew. So your Highness Duke of Ning was hiding here. You've made me look for you. Chu Qingge suddenly came upstairs. Ning Qing glanced at her before ignoring her. His cold face looked down at the imperial city. Your Highness Duke of Ning, has my elder brother come to find you? I heard Duan Muyao's been gone for days and hasn't returned yet, Chu Qingge asked next. Duan Muyao had been investigating Empress Shue's death in the Chu clan barracks, but had suddenly left for some unknown reason. She hadn't yet returned, so Empress Shue's case had been delayed. Chu Qingge had been keeping an eye on the situation and wanted to see Chu Tianyin multiple times to give him ideas. Unfortunately, he didn't want to see her. In his eyes, she was nothing but a traitor. She was too lazy to explain herself or argue. She knew she'd wronged the Chu clan, but they were the ones who wronged her first, weren't they? Chu Tianyin ignored her, but there was still Ning Qing. As long as Ning Qing nodded, Chu Tianyin would have to do as he was told. The two elders of the Chu clan were still locked up in prison, while Chu Tianyin was a filial son. How would he dare defy Ning Qing? When did you start caring about the Chu clan troops? Ning Qing was still looking down with a mocking smile. As soon as Chu Qingge saw him, she'd either ask him about Long Fei Yi or Han Yunxi. He was already sick of her. If he hadn't been distracted by her footsteps, he would have run away long ago. Chu clan army. Chu Qingge was leaning lazily against the railing. Her dazzling golden Empress Dowager robes didn't hide her natural aloofness, because even now, her heart was still high above the masses. This consort only cares about His Highness King Ning. After all, this consort and His Highness King Ning are bound together for good or ill. As for the Chu clan army, that's my elder brother's problem. Chu Qingge lazily rose to her feet and took a step closer to Ning Qing. In a self-mocking tone, she said, "A married daughter is like spilled water." If this was the past, Ning Qing would still glance at Chu Qingge and compare her to Han Yunxi. After all, they were both women who liked Long Fei Yi, so they shouldn't be too far off. If you know yourself and your enemy, you will never be defeated. Even if you don't know Long Fei Yi, you should at least know what kind of women liked him. But now Ning Qing couldn't even be bothered to look at Chu Qingge. In fact, he even rejected her approach. He'd never thought about women before, so he couldn't understand how two women of similar ages could be so far apart from each other. Duke of Ning. Chu Qingge called out. Only then did Ning Qing recover his senses and realize he'd spaced out again. Damn it. Despite his irritation, his face was still as cold as ice. He pulled away from Chu Qingge and asked, "Stop wasting words. What did you find your lordship for?" Chu Qingge was waiting for those exact words. She got straight to the point and said, "If my elder brother can't deal with Duan Muyao, why don't I do it instead?" You? Ning Qing was surprised. Chu Qingge nodded confidently. "I grew up with Duan Muyao." We practiced martial arts together and studied together. I know her personality better than anyone. If Chu Qingge hadn't mentioned it, Ning Qing would have overlooked this point. Women always understood other women better than men, so it would be easier for a woman to deal with another woman than a man. What brilliant plan do you have? Ning Qing asked. Chu Qingge smiled and gestured for Ning Qing to come closer, but Ning Qing refused without hesitation. There's no one else here, so just say it. Chu Qingge's lips curved into a self-mocking smile. I must be missing that man too much. I'm actually trying to find traces of him on Ning Cheng's body. As long as we frame Han Yunxi for Empress Shui's assassination, Duan Muyao will definitely believe us. Moreover, she'll definitely investigate to the end. Chu Qingge said. As much as she hated Han Yunxi, Duan Muyao hated Han Yunxi as much as she did. Her hatred would only grow. Most importantly, Duan Muyao could bring the matter to Kenzo's ears. That way, even with Long Fei Ye's protection, Han Yunxi would still be in a lot of trouble. She had often heard Duan Muyao say that Long Fei Yi treated Kenzo's elders with utmost respect and had never disobeyed him. Many times, her close friends had discussed marriage, but Duan Muyao had always been smug and claimed that her master would uphold justice for her. In other words, the Kenzo's elders were trying to matchmake the two of them. Duke of Ning, as long as you and my big brother cooperate well and produce some evidence, Duan Muyao will definitely believe us. When Ning Qing didn't reply, Chu Qingge added, I believe that Duan Muyao will not only believe us, but add oil to the fire to make Han Yunxi's crimes a reality. Let Duan Muyao and Han Yunxi fight it out. You and Chu Tianyin can just watch the show. You're so sure. Ning Qing was intrigued. He had been keeping tabs on Empress Shui's affairs as well. Although Long Fei Yi hadn't made any moves, he had long suspected that Long Fei Yi had something to do with the assassination attempt. Besides Western Zhou, the only other enemy of the Chu and Ning clans was Long Fei Yi. As for Long Tianma, he didn't care at all. Western Zhou's imperial clan wouldn't be so ruthless as to kill the empress to sow discord between the Chu clan and Celestial Mountain. Only Long Fei Yi was the prime suspect. Chu Tianyin cooperated with Duan Muyao's investigation while Ning Qing sent his own men to investigate in secret as well. Unfortunately, they hadn't found any evidence yet. Duke of Ning, why don't we make a bet? Chu Qingge smiled. She was worried that Ning Qing wouldn't agree. But Ning Qing simply nodded his head. All right, let's do that. He immediately ordered someone to summon Chu Tianyin. Chu Qingge was secretly delighted. Then I won't disturb you two any longer. Chu Qingge's face turned vicious as she turned around. Ning Qing had told her before that he'd help her deal with Han Yunxi as long as she betrayed the Chu clan. But Ning Qing had been vague all the time. He hadn't even told her how to deal with Han Yunxi or how to kidnap Han Yunxi. Now she understood that Ning Qing was just trying to cheer her up. Rather than wait for Ning Qing to make his move, it was better for her to come up with her own ideas. As long as Ning Qing cooperated, everything would be fine. On the surface, she was helping the Chu and Ning clans solve their problems, but in truth, she was putting Han Yunxi to death. She was certain that once Duan Muyao found out that Han Yunxi was Empress Shui's murderer, she'd definitely make a fuss before Kenzo. Based on how much old Kenzo doted on Duan Muyao, even Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to protect Han Yunxi. Chu Qingge descended the stairs step by step, finally feeling better after 2 years of depression. She was waiting. It hadn't been easy for her to become Tianning's Empress Dowager, but she wasn't just going to take Han Yunxi's life. Long Fei Yi, one day, I, Chu Qingge, will have the right to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Chu Qingge hadn't left long before Chu Tianyin arrived. He didn't agree with Chu Qingge's demand for equal footing, so he dropped to one knee as soon as he arrived. Greetings to your Highness Duke of Ning. His father and uncle were both in Ning Cheng's hands, while the Chu clan troops had surrendered. Ever since Ning Cheng had rescued him, Chu Tianyin had taken the stance of pledging his loyalty to him to the death. Ning Cheng was still leaning against the railing, but gave him a sidelong glance. He didn't allow him to rise. I haven't seen you around the army these past few days. Where did you go? I went around the borders of Yaoshui. Long Fei Yi only has 3,000 troops stationed there, Chu Tianyin replied honestly. What about the other troops? Ning Cheng finally grew serious. They're all south of Yaoshui, but 3,000 troops are enough. He won't return Yaoshui prefecture to Western Zhou, Chu Tianyin said. Ning Cheng laughed coldly. Obviously. Chu Tianyin hid his anger deep in his eyes as he lowered his head in silence. Has Duan Muyao returned yet? Ning Cheng asked next. No news yet. Empress Shui's death was suspicious. She had no injuries or illnesses, nor any signs of poison. It'll be difficult to convince her that an assassination attempt was behind it, Chu Tianyin added. You need to get involved in this matter. Ning Cheng was ordering him, not negotiating. He didn't give Chu Tianyin any leeway. It's been so many years. Have you found any traces of the Shadow Clan? Duke of Ning, do you have an idea about Empress Shui's death? Chu Tianyin probed. Unfortunately, Ning Cheng ignored him. Answer your lordship's question. The Shadow Clan. Only Gu Beiwei was left of the Shadow Clan. Gu Beiwei was his only hope. How could Chu Tianyin betray Gu Beiwei? He was still hoping to use Gu Beiwei to borrow Long Fei Ye's strength to bite back at Ning Cheng. From what he understood of Ning Cheng, the man would never let go of his father and uncle. The Chu clan troops would remain beneath his Ning clan troops, while the Nether clan would remain beneath the Di clan. He couldn't accept this. Ever since Chu Chinga's marriage alliance with Tianning, he'd fought against Long Fei Yi and tried all sorts of ways to bewitch Emperor Tianhui to prepare Chu Chinga's path. His father and uncle even found medical city's head elder Ling to do something as immoral as inducing labor. They'd spent so much time and effort and paid so much just so they could break away from Western Zhou's imperial clan and gain a foothold in Cloud Realm continent. They'd wanted to use Tianning as a stronghold and revive Western Qin in the name of gathering the world's heroes to seize power. But all of their efforts had ended up in Ning Cheng's hands. In other words, Ning Cheng had stepped over the corpses of his Chu clan's archers to ascend to the position of regent. He refused to accept this, much less accept it. He was very clear that the Chu clan's current strength was too weak to fight for anything else. The only thought in his heart was revenge. Even if he had to work with his former rival Long Fei Yi, he still wanted to drag Ning Cheng off his throne and stomp him beneath his feet. When his father and uncle found out that the Ning clan was the former Di clan, they hadn't told Gu Beiwei or Gu Beiwei's origins to Ning Cheng. He hadn't betrayed Gu Beiwei even after being tortured by Long Fei Yi, so he'd never betray Gu Beiwei in front of Ning Cheng. He stared into Ning Cheng's eyes and said seriously, the Shadow Clan has long died out. A flash of grief flashed past Ning Cheng's eyes, but he pretended to be relaxed with a smile. What a pity. Do you have any leads on Western Qin's imperial orphan? Chapter 653. The only clue the Nether clan's Chu clan had was the Phoenix birthmark. They'd suspected Han Yunshi in the past, but Su Xiaoyu's investigations had denied them. Chu Tianyin had already given up on finding Western Qin's imperial clan, but he'd never tell anyone about the Phoenix birthmark, especially Ning Cheng. If his Chu clan couldn't get their hands on it, Ning Cheng should forget about it. In their past dealings, Ning Cheng had repeatedly expressed his sincerity to Western Qin's imperial clan. But in Chu Tiannin's eyes, he was nothing more than a hypocrite. Just like the Chu clan, he only wanted to use the emperor to command his vassals. Now that he was Tianning's regent, wasn't that exactly what he was doing? That damn Chu Qingge and that swaddling emperor were both under Ning Cheng's control. Tianning's true master had long been Ning Qing. No. If I did, the Chu clan wouldn't have fallen to its current state, Chu Tianyin feigned self-mockery. Ning Qing looked him up and down. Just then, they discussed a few things and said quite a few things. Just how much did Ning Qing believe and how much did he suspect? Only he knew. Ning Qing examined Chu Tianyin for a while before saying, "You may withdraw. Empress Shui's matter." Chu Tianyin trailed off. He didn't understand why Ning Qing had suddenly stopped him from getting involved. Could it be that Ning Qing suspected something? You don't need to worry about Empress Shui's matters. How can I ignore matters that concern my Chu clan troops? Chu Tianyin grew anxious. Don't worry, your lordship won't let the Chu clan suffer any losses, Ning Qing said before waving a hand to dismiss Chu Tianyin. Chu Tianyin's suspicions grew, but he didn't dare say more. As soon as Chu Tianyin left, Ning Nuo walked out of his room. It was still chilly in the north, but he was still waving his folding fan like a refined and cultured gentleman. In reality, he was in a wretched state. Because Ning Jing had been looking for him everywhere, threatening to teach him a lesson, he had been hiding in the attic ever since he arrived in Shijing, not daring to show his face. Big brother, guess what Duan Muyao went to do? Ning Nuo asked mysteriously. Speak. Ning Qing was very impatient. Even in the face of his own hands, he was always so high and mighty, arrogant and noble. An elder brother was like a father. Moreover, he was the head of the clan. He had always treated Ning Nuo, Ning Jing, and noble consort Ning in the same way he treated his other brothers in the clan. He treated them equally without exception. Duan Muyao ran off to help Zhang Qiuzi deal with the Tang clan. In the end, she was heavily injured. When Ning Nuo said this, he chuckled. Ning Cheng's face was cold as he said in a deep voice, "Can you finish what you want to say?" Ning Nuo didn't dare to keep him in suspense any longer. He quickly told him about Tang Li offering a humble apology and how Aunt Ru had accidentally injured Duan Muyao. Ning Qing was puzzled. How could Duan Muyao be injured so easily? That's hard to say. Tang Zijin said that Aunt Ru only made a move because Duan Muyao insulted Ning Jing, Ning Nuo explained. They want to join forces with us to bite back at Duan Muyao. That way, they can suppress Zhang Qiuzi. You still want to provoke Duan Muyao at a time like this? Ning Qing asked thoughtfully. He couldn't help but feel that things between the Tang clan and Celestial Mountain were strange. He wondered if Long Fei Yi was involved. Does Big Brother mean to refuse them? Ning Nuo could make his own decisions, but he had to ask for his big brother's opinion. Otherwise, he'd have to take responsibility again if Ning Jing asked. After some hesitation, Ning Qing said, set the wedding date as soon as possible. Tell Ning Jing to stay at the Tang clan for at least a year. Otherwise, she can never return to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. Ning Nuo could already imagine Ning Jing's reaction when she heard the order. Yes. I'll send someone to tell her right away. While Ning Qing was plotting against Empress Shui, Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue were doing the same. Gu Beiyue immediately told Long Fei Yi about Chu Tianyin's secret missive as soon as he received it. Ning Qing didn't let Chu Tianyin get involved. Could it be that he suspects him? Gu Beiyue asked. He's too slow, Long Fei Yi said. Chu Tianyin wanted to create fake evidence to frame Ning Qing as Empress Shui's assassin. It was a good plan, but he was too slow to act. Or perhaps Ning Qing has other ways to deal with Duan Muyao. Gu Beiyue mused. Long Fei's slender fingers tapped against the table as he fell silent. Abruptly, he laughed coldly. Tell Chu Tianyin that everything will proceed as planned. We'll deal with all changes without change. Gu Beiyue didn't understand. Your Highness, if that's the case, then Chu Tianyin might be useless as a chess piece. Ning Qing had already told Chu Tianyin not to interfere. If Chu Tianyin made up evidence to frame Ning Qing, wouldn't that be the same as telling Ning Qing that he was a traitor? Let him figure it out himself. Your lordship has already said that if he succeeds, I'll let bygones be bygones and rescue the two Chu elders. If his abilities are limited, then your lordship won't accept useless people, Long Feiyi said. Gu Beiyue sighed inwardly. His Highness Duke of Qin really is a ruthless man. He's only giving Chu Tianyin one chance. Success or failure, life or death, will all depend on it. Very good. This one will send him a letter by hawk tonight. Gu Beiyue agreed. Ning Qing had already made preparations, but Long Feiyi wanted everything to proceed as planned. Between the two of them, who would make the first move and who would come out on top would most likely be decided within the next few days. The peaceful western region of Cloud Realm continent had long since become turbulent. This time, it was no longer a contest between three powers, but a contest between Long Feiyi and Ning Qing. Long Feiyi had just stepped out of Gu Beiyue's courtyard when he saw Han Yunxi and Mu Ling walking towards him. Why are you here? Han Yunxi immediately grew uneasy. Aside from accompanying her to check on Gu Beiyue's injuries, Long Feiyi had never come here alone. What was he doing here? Was he trying to make things difficult for Gu Beiyue? Mu Ling was also puzzled. Your Highness Duke of Qin, could it be that you're sick and are here to see a doctor? Han Yunxi grew even more nervous at these words. She hurried forward and took Long Feiyi's hand to check his pulse. Were you feeling unwell? Mu Ling had been here for a few days, but Gu was nowhere to be seen. Han Yunxi had specially accompanied Mu Ling out for a walk today and had just returned. Since she hadn't seen Long Feiyi, she decided to check on Gu Beiyue's injuries first. The corners of Long Feiyi's mouth twitched. It's nothing. This prince just came to see if Gu Qisha was here. I've been looking for him for a while now. Is he here? Mu Ling asked anxiously. Long Feiyi couldn't be bothered with her. He turned to Han Yunxi and said, Are you going in? I'll wait for you here. Han Yunxi looked at Long Feiyi, then at the courtyard. She had a feeling that something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Let's go in and have a cup of tea. She tugged at Long Feiyi's hand. Long Feiyi had no choice but to follow her inside. Gu Beiyue was still in the courtyard, so he had clearly heard their conversation. When he saw Long Feiyi being dragged inside by Han Yunxi, a trace of a warm and doting smile flitted across his eyes. He cherished a person. Seeing her being cherished was enough to satisfy him. Some love was between two people. It was selfish. On the other hand, some love was between one person. It was noble. Gu Beiyue belonged to the latter category. Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei, Miss Ling, Even though he was sitting in a wheelchair, he didn't lose his manners. Long Feiyi took a seat at the side. As usual, he brewed tea without saying a word. Mu Ling didn't see Gu, so she slumped weakly on the stone table. Han Yunxi had long since gotten used to this. She earnestly inquired about and examined Gu Beiyue's injuries. Gu Beiyue was a doctor, but she was still worried and insisted on checking on him regularly. It takes 100 days for bones and tendons to heal. Even with the tendon-growing ointment, you still have to count the days. Han Yunxi sighed. You'll be able to recover by summer. The indifferent Gu Beiyue was somewhat agitated. It had been far too long since he'd stood up. Your Highness Duke of Qin, esteemed Wang Fei, if this one can stand up again, this one must first pay respects to the two of you in thanks. It wasn't clear whether Long Fei Yi was listening, but he didn't say anything. Han Yunqi smiled and said, "You're too polite. Last time, you even saved the Duke of Qin's life. How can we thank you?" Gu Beiyue had nothing to say. Han Yunqi found his bashful appearance rather cute. Long Fei Yi finally looked over. When he saw Gu Beiyue's appearance, his heart was filled with disdain. Gu Beiyue was a big liar. He must be crazy to allow Gu Beiyue to trick Han Yunqi like this. When he saw Long Fei Yi looking over, Gu Beiyue even gave him a meaningful glance. Long Fei Yi's expression immediately turned cold and he looked away. Fortunately, Han Yunqi didn't notice this scene. At this time, she was pondering something. She and Long Fei Yi were about to go to Tianshan Mountain. She didn't know if they'd be able to see Gu Beiyue stand up in time. Actually, she wanted to bring Gu Beiyue with her to Tianshan Mountain. Perhaps Gu Beiyue could cure the old man in Kenzo's insanity. If that happened, Duanmuya wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. After leaving Gu Beiyue's courtyard, Mu Ling went to look for her Qi brother. Han Yunqi said in a low voice, "Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue is a trustworthy person." So, Long Fei Yi knew that Han Yunqi had something to say to him. "Perhaps he can cure your master's insanity." Han Yunqi said seriously. "Master won't be willing." Long Fei Yi said indifferently. He had wanted to invite a famous doctor from Medical City to treat his master, but he had been rejected. Han Yunqi nodded helplessly. "All right, he didn't make things difficult for you about the treatment, did he?" Han Yunqi had been thinking about this matter. "It's over. Don't worry." Long Fei Yi hated Duanmu Yao's methods to begin with, so he didn't want to talk about it. "Emin, let's not talk about it anymore," Han Yunqi said, but she was still worried. She wasn't afraid that Duanmu Yao would complain to Kenzo. In fact, she wanted to have a fight with Duanmu Yao. She didn't believe that Kenzo wouldn't be able to tell right from wrong. Unexpectedly, 3 days later, Han Yunqi really did have to fight with Duanmu Yao again. Kenzo wrote another letter to Long Fei Yi. He didn't order Long Fei Yi to do anything, but instead angrily rebuked Long Fei Yi for condoning Han Yunqi's murder of Duanmu Yao's mother, Empress Shui. He warned Long Fei Yi that if Duanmu Yao sought revenge on Han Yunqi, Long Fei Yi wasn't allowed to interfere. Let the two women resolve it themselves. If Long Fei Yi interfered, he would no longer recognize Long Fei Yi as his disciple. After reading the letter, Han Yunqi was dumbfounded. She wanted to cry, but no tears came out. "Your Highness, the one who killed Empress Shui, was clearly you." A complicated look flitted across Long Fei Yi's eyes. "So this is what Ning Qing is doing. Despicable." Chapter 654. Long Fei Yi was clearly the one who sent assassins to assassinate Empress Shui, but now Han Yunqi had become the scapegoat. Ever since she became Qin Wangfei, Han Yunqi had been wronged many times. She had long since gotten used to it. But this time, she looked at Long Fei Yi with a silly smile. She didn't know what to do. No matter how Ning Qing tried to frame her, she wasn't afraid. Empress Shui's corpse was still there, so the truth was still there. She wasn't a coroner, but she had plenty of ways to find out the true cause of Empress Shui's death. As long as she revealed the truth, she would be cleared of all charges. But now, she couldn't really reveal the truth. Because the true culprit was her husband, Long Fei Yi. Han Yunqi leaned over the tea table, pretending to be serious as she stared at Long Fei Yi. She didn't say anything, but it was clear that she was warning Long Fei Yi. "Long Fei Yi, do as you see fit. Long Fei Yi walked over and tousled Han Yunqi's bangs. Scared? Goading her. Han Yunqi glared at him but didn't answer. Long Fei Yi laughed heartily. This prince will admit to it. Han Yunqi immediately slapped his hand away. What's there to admit without evidence? I won't admit it, and you're even less allowed to admit it. I won't admit it even if you beat me to death. Wasn't that exactly what Long Fei wanted her to say? Coldly, he ordered, "Someone, bring me brush and ink." Long Fei Yi was about to reply to Elder Kenzo's letter. Han Yunqi immediately scooted over to take a look. She discovered that the usually taciturn Long Fei Yi had written several lines this time. The gist of it was that Duanmu Yao couldn't make unfounded accusations without evidence. If Duanmu Yao could prove that Empress Shui was killed by Han Yunqi, then he wouldn't interfere in their grudge. However, if Duanmu Yao was unable to provide any evidence, he would definitely pursue the matter against Duanmu Yao for framing him. He would also plead with Elder Kenzo not to interfere. After Long Fei Yi finished writing, Han Yunqi asked, "That's it?" "Okay." Long Fei Yi sealed the box and even stamped his seal on it to make sure that no one would steal it. Therefore, once your master agrees to your request, he will definitely agree to your request. Even if the real culprit is found to be you, your master can't intervene in this matter. Han Yunqi asked jokingly. This was indeed a loophole. However, how could Long Fei Yi be so stupid as to expose himself? After all, he did not want to anger his master Kenzo. Moreover, he did not want to offend the royal family of Western Zhou. Northern Li hadn't made any moves in the past 6 months, but he had always been on guard against them. After all, Western Zhou was a force that couldn't be ignored when dealing with Northern Li. After having the letter sent away, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi did not act rashly. They were both people who could keep their cool. After all, Duanmu Yao had only reported to Elder Kenzo. The matter hadn't really blown up yet. It would be foolish of them to take the initiative to stir up trouble. Duanmu Yao was waiting for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi's reactions. She lived at the border between Yaoshui Commandery and Fenglin Commandery. She had already brought Empress Shui's corpse out of the Chu clan's barracks. She also had evidence that Han Yunqi had killed her mother. She was just waiting for news from her master so that she could deal the fatal blow to Han Yunqi. That woman not only stole her childhood sweetheart, her senior martial brother, but also killed the mother who loved her the most. If this could be tolerated, what could be tolerated? This time, no matter what price she had to pay, she would destroy Han Yunqi's reputation and make her pay with blood. Princess, a letter from Celestial Mountain. One of her servant girls brought over the letter. It wasn't from Elder Kenzo, but someone she'd arranged to stay by Kenzo's side. After reading the letter, Duanmu Yao knitted her brows. Has he lost his mind again? Her master had already received the Duke of Qin's reply, but he'd lost his mind and refused to read it himself. Neither did he allow anyone else to open it, so no one knew what her senior martial brother had written. Princess, the Duke of Qin wouldn't dare to defy Elder Kenzo. As this servant sees it, we should stick to the plan and finish the battle quickly so we can avenge esteemed Empress and rest in peace, the servant girl coaxed in a low voice. Cold, Duanmu Yao said, this princess is just giving master a heads up. Chu Qing's evidence is so ample that even if the Duke of Qin wants to protect that slut, he won't be able to stop everyone's mouths. I refuse to believe that senior martial brother would offend the entire world for her sake. The more Duanmu Yao thought, the angrier she grew. She issued orders on the spot to reveal Han Yunqi's murder of Empress Shui to the public. 3 days later, she challenged Han Yunqi to a blood debt. At the same time, she asked the Duke of Qin why he'd allowed Han Yunqi to commit such heinous crimes while cooperating with Western Zhou. Once the news spread, the peaceful western regions grew lively again. Various factions began to pay attention to the matter. Chu Chinga's temper flared as soon as she heard the news. Ignoring the presence of her servants, she cursed, "That brainless slut. With a brain like hers, she still hopes for the Duke of Qin's favor. She's dreaming for the wildest." Chu Chinga was the one who'd provided Duan Muyao with the evidence against Han Yunxi. She only wanted Duan Muyao to cause trouble for Han Yunxi, but she ended up dragging His Highness Duke of Qin down with her. Is Long Feiyi someone she can question? Why should he give her an explanation? Despite her current predicament, all of Chu Chinga's hatred was still directed at Han Yunxi. She didn't hate Long Feiyi at all, much less hurt him. Abruptly, the sound of a baby crying filled the room. Only then did Chu Chinga calm down. All of the servants around her were baffled. They couldn't understand the Empress Dowager's agitation, but none of them dared to ask. Head Elder Ling and Lady Lianxin had gone into the mountains to pick medicinal plants, leaving Chu Chinga to take care of the baby herself. Although she was filled with resentment, she still grew anxious at the sound of the baby's cries. She was about to enter the room when Ning Qing showed up. As the Prince Regent, he could enter and leave Tianning's imperial harem as he pleased. No one dared to stop him. Today, he was dressed in dazzling gold robes, giving him a natural air of nobility. As soon as he stepped through the doors, his proud figure filled the room with oppressive pressure. "Greetings to Your Highness Duke of Ning. May Your Highness Duke of Ning prosper." Everyone in the room fell to their knees. A few of the servant girls couldn't help but sneak a peek at him before quickly lowering their heads in fear. They couldn't help but love him. This man wasn't someone ordinary women could imagine, but all of the women in this room were filled with illusions. Chu Chinga turned her head and almost mistook Ning Qing for Long Feiyi. Even though she knew the man before her wasn't the one in her heart, she still stared at him blankly. Ning Qing didn't know what Chu Chinga's gaze meant. He didn't like it, but he was too lazy to pay her any attention. He strode over. No matter how powerful the Prince Regent was, he still had to pay respects to the Empress Dowager. Unfortunately, the palace had no such customs after he came to West Jing. "Aya, what kind of wind is blowing today to bring Your Highness Duke of Ning here?" Chu Chinga smiled. Ning Qing murmured, "When you've used up that acupuncture needle, remember to return it to your lordship." So speaking, he turned to leave. That's it. Chu Chinga couldn't believe that Ning Qing would come all the way here just to remind her of such a trivial matter. Among the evidence she'd given Duan Muyao was a needle that Han Yunxi had used before. Ning Qing was the one who'd provided it. She assumed that Ning Qing had found the needle just to frame Han Yunxi, but now that didn't seem to be the case. "Remember, if you lose it, your lordship will take responsibility," Ning Qing warned as he walked away without looking back. "That needle is still useful. What else do you want to do?" Chu Chinga chased after him. She didn't want to miss a single thing that had to do with Han Yunxi. "Just do your job well. Why do you care so much?" Ning Qing reprimanded cold. "Don't worry, I definitely won't disappoint you." Chu Chinga was confident in both herself and Duan Muyao. But in Ning Chang's eyes, these two women were the same kind of fools. They wanted to scheme against Han Yunxi, but had no idea that their actions would affect Long Feiyi far more than Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was Long Feiyi's official consort. How could Long Feiyi not know of her actions? Thus, anyone with half a brain wouldn't believe that Han Yunxi was the one who killed Empress Shui. They'd only suspect that the Long Feiyi was the culprit, or that the Long Feiyi had ordered Han Yunxi to do it. "Woman, why are you meddling in political affairs? Long Feiyi, take this." Ning Qing gave a cold snort before walking away with his hands clasped behind his back. Slowly, his figure disappeared into the depths of the palace. Reality proved that Ning Qing was right. Besides Duan Muyao challenging Han Yunxi, all the other powers began to suspect Long Fei Yi. Western Zhou's Emperor Kongqing couldn't sit still and personally wrote a long letter demanding an explanation from Long Fei Yi. Otherwise, Western Zhou and the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate would never form an alliance. Even in Tianan country, Long Tianma and Mu Qinggu began to suspect Long Fei Yi. Qin Wangfei would never kill Empress Shui for no reason. If such a thing really happened, it must have been the Duke of Qin's orders. Mu Qinggu had long felt moved by the injustice of Han Yunxi's actions. As I see it, there's something fishy about all this. If the Duke of Qin really did make a move, he wouldn't have sent Qin Wangfei to do it, Long Tianma muttered to himself. General Mu didn't seem interested in the matter. He asked, Qinggu, has there been any news from Northern Li's horse farms lately? We've received news that South City's horse farms are wantonly buying followers from the herdsmen. There's been no news from the other two farms, Mu Qinggu replied honestly. General Mu said unhappily, do we need you to tell us something that everyone already knows? Keeping followers is just a pretense. Did you take it for real? It would take at least 3 years for followers to grow into battle horses. Last year, South City's horse farms had only lost mature war horses that could be used for 3 to 15 years. It wouldn't be as easy as keeping followers to fill the gap. How could Northern Li survive in Cloud Realm continent without war horses after 3 to 5 years? Mu Qinggu hung his head, afraid to utter a word. Unless Northern Li can get their horses, they won't get involved in the chaos in the West. If Northern Li doesn't meddle in the affairs of the West, it'll be the Duke of Qin and Ning Cheng's world. There'll be plenty of good shows between those two, just wait and see. General Mu said, before adding, I'm afraid Duan Muyao was used by Ning Cheng as a spear for Empress Shui's affairs. Hearing this, Long Tianma and Mu Qinggu couldn't help but admire him. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Long Tianma knew he was no match for Ning Cheng, so all he could do was hide in a corner and preserve his strength. Although Northern Li wouldn't get involved in the chaos in the West, the Northern Dynasty's emperors had ordered Jun Yixia to keep an eye on the situation there. Jun Yixia might have been banished from the imperial clan, but he was still the right and left arm of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. He had been itching to join hands with Duan Muyao for the chaos in the West, but his master's warning prevented him from taking action. Currently, he was playing chess with his master, Bai Yanqing. He couldn't help but ask, Master, do you think Duan Muyao can win this time? Chapter 655. Could Duan Muyao win? Bai Yanqing didn't seem to hear Jun Yixia's question. He held the chess piece in one hand and stroked his beard with the other as he seriously pondered the game. Jun Yixia was such an arrogant and insufferably arrogant person. But in front of his master, he was always obedient like a big boy. Seeing that his master didn't answer, he didn't dare to ask a second question no matter how curious he was. He could only wait quietly for his master to make his next move. Little junior sister Bai Yuqiao looked at Jun Yixia from the sidelines and felt pity for him for some reason. In her eyes, Jun Yixia was absolutely obedient and trusting of her master, but her master kept all sorts of secrets from her senior brother. Bai Yuqiao didn't understand why her master kept so many things from her senior brother. She secretly felt that it was unfair to him, but she never dared to say anything. She knew better than her senior brother how terrifying it was to betray her master. After a while, Bai Yanqing didn't make his move, but said mildly, whether she wins or loses depends on what she's competing on and how she's competing. Jun Yixia rejoiced and quickly said, just this once, the matter of Empress Shui. Winning or losing doesn't depend on such trivial matters, but on the end. Just wait. Duan Muyao will win, Bai Yanqing said lightly. The end? Could it be that master already has plans? Jun Yixia asked in a low voice. As he saw it, His master had told him to get involved in Han Yunxi and Long Fei Ye's affairs not because he was afraid he'd cause trouble, but because he had other plans. Bai Yanqing didn't reveal anything, but asked, "Just wait. How long will it take to fill the gap in South City's horse farms?" Jun Yixie grew gloomy. Master was always like this, changing the topic in the middle of a sentence. It made his heart itch. When Jun Yixie didn't reply, Bai Qingyan gave him an unhappy glare before he obediently replied, "It'll take at least a year or so to make up for the shortfall. I've already contacted Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's horse merchants. If we can strike a deal with them, the shortfall won't be so severe," Jun Yixie replied honestly. "Has the planting of herbs in the Snow Mountain been started?" Bai Yanqing asked again. "There are still some details to be discussed." "Haha, Ning Jing, this woman is really hard to deal with. Recently, she's been preparing for her wedding, so the Snow Mountain matter has been delayed." Jun Yixie was also very busy during this period. Bai Yanqing only nodded and didn't comment on anything. He continued to play chess. Over the past few days, the matter with Empress Shui had only grown bigger and bigger, but Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi had remained unmoved. They had neither expressed their stance nor made any public statements. As a result, everyone was even more curious about the truth of the matter. There were still 2 days before Duanmu Yao's challenge, but Han Yunxi was currently sitting in the courtyard, smiling foolishly at a table of letters. All of them were addressed to her. There were letters from the Tian and General Mu's estate, the South Central Region's Commander-in-Chief's estate, Pilfine Pharmacy, Medical City, Medicine City, and even the black market. All of the letters expressed their concern and reminded her to be careful of Duanmu Yao and avoid fighting her head-on. The letter from Medical City was written by Third Elder Shin, who said that if Han Yunxi was willing, he could recommend the best coroner in Cloud Realm Continent and come personally to assist with the autopsy. The letter from Medicine City was written by the King of Medicine himself. That old man who didn't care about worldly affairs actually knew about the matter as well. In the letter, he said that if Han Yunxi was willing, she could bring Empress Shui's body to the medicine hut so he could personally assist with the autopsy. The letter even included a greeting from the old man from Medicine requesting cave. Han Yunxi had always known that she didn't have good relations with people. She would offend people for no apparent reason and incur their hatred and enmity. Reading through the pile of letters, she suddenly realized that she had quite a few friends. She smiled at Long Fei Yi and said, "My relations with people seem pretty good. Does this count as having friends all over the world?" "This is called networking," Long Fei Yi remarked. Even he had to admit that Han Yunxi's connections in Cloud Realm Continent over the years weren't to be underestimated. Esteemed Wang Fei has always had good relations with people. Before Gu Beiyue could finish, a black figure suddenly flew down from the sky. It was none other than Gu. He was dressed in black robes that covered his entire body except for his frivolous eyes. More accurately, he should be called Gu Qisha. Gu Qisha rushed towards Han Yunxi as soon as he touched the ground, but Long Fei Yi kicked him before he could even get close. Fortunately, he retreated in time. He was too anxious to argue with Long Fei to ask, "Poison Lass, is Duanmu Yao serious about coming to challenge us?" Han Yunxi didn't speak, but slowly turned to look into the room. Gu Beiyue was smiling while Long Fei Yi drank his tea. As long as Gu Qisha stayed away from Han Yunxi, he wouldn't bother with his business. Poison Lass, Gu Qisha wanted to ask more questions, but Mu Ling suddenly rushed out of the room and cried, "Your Excellency Pill Fiend." Besides Mu Ling, everyone else knew that Gu Qisha had been avoiding Mu Ling, on purpose for the past few days. Everyone remained silent, waiting for Gu Qisha to run away. Unexpectedly, Gu Qisha ignored Mu Ling, and didn't rush to leave. Instead, he asked Han Yunxi with concern, "Poison Lass, is that true?" Mu Ling, who was rushing over, stopped in her tracks when she saw this. Her joyous expression froze on her face as she stared blankly at Gu Qishaw's anxious expression. She should be happy that he finally appeared, happy that he didn't run away as soon as he saw her. But why does my heart hurt so much? It's true. Han Yunxi replied, then stood up and pulled Mu Ling over. She questioned Gu Qishaw, this lass has been waiting for you for days. You're really putting on airs, aren't you? Gu Qishaw ignored them and turned to Long Fei Yi. Duke of Qin, are you really going to let Poison Lass fight that slut Duan Muyao one-on-one? Long Fei Yi couldn't be bothered to answer. Gu Qishaw didn't need to worry about this matter. We'll talk about it when she gets here. She's not even here yet, so who knows what kind of evidence she'll bring. If I don't admit it, what can she do to me? After Han Yunxi explained, she changed the topic and said seriously, Ling wants to talk to you about the Mu family. Madame Lian Xian's matter has dragged on for so long, shouldn't you give her an answer? The two of you should have a good talk. Also, I've given Ling the medicine tome the king of medicine gave her. If there's anything she doesn't understand, please teach her. The two of you will be the pillars of Pill Fiend Pharmacy in the future. Only then did Gu Qishaw look at Mu Ling. Mu Ling's heart was stifled, but she didn't show it on her face. She immediately put on a worshipful expression and smiled obsequiously at Gu Qishaw. Esteemed Senior Pill Fiend, I offended you last time at Pill Fiend Pharmacy. Please forgive me on account of esteemed Wang Fei and His Highness. Gu Qishaw had long forgotten that this girl had challenged him on Pill Fiend Pharmacy's grand opening day. He didn't say anything and simply nodded before sitting down next to Gu Beiyue. Mu Ling immediately leaned over and respectfully poured him a cup of tea. Esteemed senior, please be careful. It's hot. Gu Qishaw raised a brow at her and said in a strange tone, You're making me sound old. How about I call you master? Mu Ling hurriedly asked. She clearly wanted to take him as her master. Gu Qishaw picked up a cup of tea and drank it under his black robes, pretending not to hear her. However, Mu Ling was even more ruthless. She immediately knelt down and kowtowed to him. If master doesn't object, please accept this bow from your disciple. Gu Qishaw spat out the tea in his mouth. I didn't agree. Get up. Mu Ling blinked her large eyes innocently. But I've already kowtowed. What should I do? Would he still have any freedom if he accepted a disciple like this? Who knows when she'll discover the truth? Gu Qishaw was truly frightened. He earnestly said, I'll kowtow back to you, all right. Mu Ling's eyes were wet, but she still laughed out loud. Senior really knows how to joke. If Senior isn't willing, then forget it. It wasn't clear how many people present noticed the tears in Mu Ling's eyes, but Han Yunxi did. Looking at this stubborn girl, Han Yunxi's heart ached. Perhaps it was because she saw a shadow of herself in the past, or perhaps it was because blood was thicker than water, or perhaps it was because they hit it off. However, Han Yunxi knew that there was only so much she could do to help Gu Qishaw. If she continued to help Gu Qishaw, it would only backfire. When it came to matters of love, both parties had to be willing. Although she was touched by Mu Ling's willingness, she couldn't possibly force or scheme against Gu Qishaw. Long Fei Yi brought over a cup of tea, interrupting Han Yunxi's train of thought. She looked at him, but he was busy brewing tea and didn't notice her. From this angle, the curve of his face was so cold that it was penetrating, exuding a cold arrogance that kept everyone at arm's length. It had been more than 3 years, but he was still the same person from 3 years ago. Not much had changed. Han Yunxi sighed in her heart. Long Fei Yi, fortunately, you also like me. Since Mu Ling had already said so, how could Gu Qishaw not agree? He smiled strangely. Forget it, forget it. Then, can Senior give me some pointers on the King of Medicine's ancient medical book? Who said that Mu Ling had given up? She still had to work hard. Han Yunxi felt heartache, but she also wanted to laugh. Gu Qixu's expression had already darkened, but fortunately, his face was hidden by his mask. All right. If you don't understand, just ask. Why are you being so polite? Even if Gu Qixu agreed, Mu Ling might not be able to find him for guidance in the future. Thank you, Senior. Mu Ling was still very happy. She actually took out the medical book on the spot and even included a thick notebook. Senior, I've already finished reading this book and memorized everything that I didn't understand. There are already more than 100 parts in this first book that I don't understand. Let's just ask these questions for today, Mu Ling said seriously. Before Gu Qixu could speak, Gu Beiyue said indifferently, this one is tired. You guys go ahead. This one will take his leave first. As soon as Gu Beiyue left, Long Feiyi stood up, followed by Han Yunxi. She smiled and said, we still have matters to attend to. You guys can take your time discussing them. Gu Qixu originally wanted to say something, but this time, he fell silent. Just like that, Mu Ling continued to pester Gu Qixu for the next 2 days, humbly asking for guidance and taking notes. After 2 days of interaction, Gu Qixu actually dispelled his previous suspicions. This was because other than asking about the medical book, Mu Ling didn't bother him at all. Perhaps he was overthinking things. Mu Ling was only interested in learning and hadn't discovered his secret. There was no harm in teaching this little girl. In any case, all of Pill Fiend Pharmacy's matters would be taken care of by her in the future. He wasn't going to guard Pill Fiend Pharmacy to the death. Early in the morning 2 days later, Duan Muyao really did come to challenge him. Chapter 656. Early in the morning, Duan Muyao was standing by the gates of Long Fei Ye's Yaoshui estate, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. Long Fei Ye's estate was located in the heart of the county town's downtown district, hidden in a deep alleyway. It was very quiet and secluded amidst the hustle and bustle. Its outer walls were very low-key and didn't attract much attention. It was all thanks to Duan Muyao that so many people had gathered here today. Not only had she revealed the location of the estate, but she'd also brought a bunch of people with her to mix in with the crowd. These people were here to act as messengers. If Han Yunxi said a single wrong word today, they'd spread it all over Cloud Realm continent with embellishments. Moreover, Duan Muyao even assigned a few people to deliver the news to Celestial Mountain. Not only did she want Master Kenzo to hate Han Yunxi, but everyone on Celestial Mountain to hate Han Yunxi as well. She wanted to make it so that Han Yunxi couldn't climb Celestial Mountain. Before she knew that Han Yunxi was her mother's murderer, Duan Muyao was already thinking of ways to smear Han Yunxi's name. Now she'd stop at nothing. Currently, Han Yunxi's group was standing on the highest floor of the estate. They couldn't see Duan Muyao from here, but they could see the figures of many onlookers. Long Fei and Han Yunxi stood in the middle, one dressed in black robes with a cold, heroic air between his brows. The other was dressed in a pink-purple silk dress, her style magnificent beyond compare. Gu Beiyue stood to Long Fei Ye's left. Although he was in a wheelchair, he still gave off a heroic and elegant air. Gu Qixu stood to Han Yunxi's right, his black robes draped over his body like a mysterious mystery. Mu Ling stood next to Gu Qixu in her gorgeous red robes. Chu Shifeng stood 3 steps behind Long Feiyi, his hand resting on his sword in a respectful manner. The group of people standing on the balcony made for a beautiful sight that was even more beautiful than a garden full of spring flowers. Unfortunately, none of them looked happy, especially Long Feiyi. He, who always liked peace and quiet, hated the kind of disturbance at the door the most. Han Yunshi observed the surrounding roofs and attics. She saw that there was no one in sight, but she knew that there must be a lot of people who came to watch the show. After all, this matter had been blown out of proportion. After all, the disparity between her and Duanmu Yao's martial prowess was too great. Many people had come to laugh at her. Gu Qixia stood on the railing, his eyes dark as he said, "Poison lass, I'm going to teach her a lesson first. I'll break the tendons in her arms and legs before you go out and fight her one-on-one." Was Gu Qixia here to make a fool of himself? Unfortunately, other than Mu Linger, no one else laughed. There was still half an incense stick's worth of time before Duanmu Yao's challenge time arrived. Gu Qixia turned back to look at her. "Poison lass, if you don't answer, I'll take it as a yes." "Do you want me to plead guilty?" Han Yunshi rolled her eyes at him. "You were the ones who killed him. So what if you admit it? Do you think His Highness Duke of Qin is afraid of Western Zhou's imperial family?" Gu Qixia retorted. Was Gu Qixia here to ask for a beating? Long Fei Yi had unknowingly turned to stare at them coldly. He didn't make a move, nor did he speak. Instead, he stared coldly at Mu Linger, who was standing next to Gu Qixia. Gu Qixia immediately shut his mouth. He was wary of the threat in Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't know that if Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi admitted to the crime, it wouldn't be as simple as offending Western Zhou's imperial family. Gu Qixia didn't know much about Duanmu Yao's backer on Celestial Mountain. Neither Long Fei Yi nor Han Yunshi had brought up the matter, so neither Gu Beiyue nor Gu Qixia knew how they were going to deal with it. Soon enough, it was time to leave. Long Fei Yi naturally accompanied Han Yunshi out of the room, followed by Gu Qixia and Mu Linger. Gu Beiyue didn't follow them, but said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, it's inconvenient for this one to move around, so I won't be going out. Please be careful." "Don't worry, it's just a small matter," Han Yunshi smiled. Before they left, Long Fei Yi instructed, "Chu Shifeng, escort Dr. Gu back to his rooms to rest." Gu Qixia couldn't help but feel doubtful. This doesn't seem like Gu Beiyue's style at all. Since when did Long Fei Yi become so humane? Did something happen between Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue while he was gone? Since he was in a hurry to leave, Gu Qixia didn't think too much about it. How could Long Fei Yi be humane? He'd probably only be a lover for the rest of his life. He told Chu Shifeng to escort Gu Beiyue because the man was supposed to help Gu Beiyue get in touch with Chu Tianyin. Although he didn't help Han Yunshi on the surface, he'd put in a lot of thought behind the scenes. As soon as it was time for the challenge, a commotion broke out at the gates. But this time, Han Yunshi didn't give anyone a chance to criticize her. She opened the gates on time. The rowdy crowd seemed to have been splashed with cold water as they fell silent. As soon as Duanmu Yao saw Han Yunshi, she angrily unsheathed her sword and pointed it at her. "Han Yunshi, what grudge did my imperial mother have against you that you'd kill her? If I don't kill you today, how am I supposed to let my imperial mother rest in peace?" As she spoke, she ignored Long Fei Yi, who'd come out behind Han Yunshi, and charged viciously at Han Yunshi with her sword. "Slut, hand over your life." Despite the approaching danger, Han Yunshi's expression remained calm and unmoving. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and stood tall and poised, full of aura. Everyone forgot about Duanmu Yao's sword and only felt that this woman had the bearing of a queen. It was difficult to conceal her elegance and dignity. Seeing that Han Yunshi wasn't dodging, Duanmu Yao's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. She lightly tapped the ground with her foot and used the momentum to move with her sword, which was as fast as an arrow. In a flash, both she and her sword turned into shadows, their speed too fast for anyone to react to. Everyone knew that Duanmu Yao had received Kenzo's teachings and that her sword skills were exquisite, but they didn't expect her to be so strong. In the blink of an eye, the sharp edge of her sword had already reached Han Yunqi's heart. It's over. In that instant, everyone's minds went blank. They were all very surprised. Everyone thought that Long Fei Yi would intervene, but given the current situation, even Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to stop her in time. Who would have thought that a miracle would happen? Long Fei Yi hadn't intervened and Duanmu Yao had retreated. Duanmu Yao could have killed Han Yunqi, but she'd retreated on her own accord. In the blink of an eye, she was already 10 steps away from Han Yunqi. She lost her balance and fell to the ground, coughing up a mouthful of black blood. What's going on? Everyone was dumbfounded. Even Gu Qixia and Mu Ling were dumbfounded. Long Fei Yi hadn't intervened, so what had Han Yunqi done? When did she become so powerful? Everyone took a closer look and saw that Han Yunqi was holding a golden needle in her mouth. It didn't look like the medical needles she usually used, but more like a concealed weapon dipped in poison, emitting a faint glow. Those in the know immediately understood what was going on. Han Yunqi was truly cunning, but also truly brave. She'd allowed Duanmu Yao to close in, but had used a poisonous needle to threaten her. Duanmu Yao only had 2 choices in the face of such a situation. One was to injure both of them and die, and the other was to retreat. If Duanmu Yao hadn't retreated, the needle in Han Yunqi's mouth would have taken her life at such a close distance. And if Duanmu Yao had retreated, she wouldn't have been able to unleash her sword energy. Instead, she would have been hit by her own energy instead. Duanmu Yao didn't have the courage to make an exception and retreat in her panic. She'd already spat out black blood, so her internal injuries weren't light at all. In reality, Duanmu Yao had already suffered internal injuries. Now, she'd suffered even more internal injuries. If the duel had started, Han Yunqi would have defeated Duanmu Yao in one move. With Duanmu Yao's current strength, she wouldn't have been able to deal with Han Yunqi's pear blossom teardrop rain. Everyone was dumbfounded when they realized what had happened. No one had expected the duel between these 2 women to end up like this. Hadn't it not even started yet? How could it have ended so quickly? Could Han Yunqi not be so scary? Han Yunqi held the poisonous needle in her mouth as she looked down at Duanmu Yao from above. Even men couldn't compare to her carefree and uninhibited aura. Her appearance was the symbol of first class, but her temperament and her elegance were even more unmatched. Gu Qixia and Mu Ling were also dumbfounded. They hadn't expected Han Yunqi to be so strong. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, "Han Yunqi is shameless. She used poison. How despicable." Han Yunqi narrowed her eyes and looked towards the source of the voice. She coldly said, "Who said that? If you have the guts, come out now." Her fierce shout silenced the already quiet crowd. But then, there was someone who wasn't afraid of death and actually stood out. It was a girl around 14 or 15 years old. Her background couldn't be discerned from her attire, but she was actually Duanmu Yao's maid. I said it. The little girl's expression was haughty, a little like Duanmu Yao's usual haughtiness. "This is between Duanmu Yao and me. What does it have to do with you? Who do you think you are?" Han Yunqi coldly asked. Her words rendered the sharp-tongued little girl speechless. After a while, she finally replied, I'm speaking up for Miss Duanmu. Can't I? Are you feeling guilty? How is it unfair?" Han Yunqi asked patiently. She hadn't expected Duanmu Yao to use violence today, only words. If Duanmu Yao wanted to slander her, she definitely wouldn't give her a chance. She definitely wouldn't leave any evidence behind. "You used poison. You just poisoned Miss Duanmu. the little girl said righteously. What kind of logic was this? Han Yunxi laughed. Who said I can't use poison? Who? Before she could finish speaking, the little girl hastily interjected, poison is a heretical art. It's used to harm people and is despised by righteous people like us. It's also forbidden by Medical City. You use this kind of evil thing to deal with Miss Duanmu. You're simply despicable and shameless. Han Yunxi angrily asked, you clearly know that this princess only knows how to use poison and not martial arts. As the proud disciple of Tianshan Kenzo, you called out my name and chased me all the way to my front door to challenge me to a duel, yet you still don't allow me to use poison. Isn't this even more despicable and shameless? She was so angry that she wanted to laugh. She looked at Duanmu Yao, who was sitting on the ground, and coldly snorted. Duanmu Yao, if you can't afford to lose, then don't come. Duanmu Yao's internal organs were in pain from her own sword aura, and her conception and governing vessels were blocked. She had just managed to catch her breath when she heard Han Yunxi's words. She was so angry that her true qi almost flowed backwards and caused her cultivation to go berserk. She supported herself with her sword and stood up. How did I lose? So it's fine for me to use poison and hidden weapons? Han Yunxi asked again. Duanmu Yao knew better than anyone the extent of her internal injuries. In her current condition, she was no match for the Tang sect's hidden weapons. She still hadn't fully recovered from her shock, so how did she end up like this? Duanmu Yao, are you admitting defeat? Or are you going to continue? Han Yunxi asked coldly. Although she didn't intend to accept the duel or admit her guilt, Duanmu Yao had attacked her as soon as she came up. She had to determine a winner. So what if you're the disciple of Tianshan Kenzo? Chapter 657. So what if she was Tianshan Kenzo's disciple and a martial arts prodigy with exceptional talent? Wasn't he still defeated by a trash like Han Yunxi in one move? To be exact, it wasn't just one move. Han Yunxi hadn't even made a move. All she did was spit out half of the poison needle she'd hidden in her mouth. Duanmu Yao had scared herself and immediately retreated to harm herself. Who knew how Duanmu Yao's people would twist the truth and spread the rumors? In any case, Long Fei Yi had already ordered people to spread the truth of the matter, even to Celestial Mountain. After all, Tianshan Kenzo was the head of the Wulin Alliance. Kenzo's disciples had always been proud of Celestial Mountain and thought highly of themselves. If they knew that Duanmu Yao had been defeated by someone who didn't know any martial arts, they would probably curse her for being a disgrace to Tianshan Kenzo. Duanmu Yao, I'll take your silence as an admission of defeat. Han Yunxi asked again. Duanmu Yao was extremely sullen. Everything had been well planned. Her senior brother wouldn't make a move out of fear of her master. She would beat up Han Yunxi first, then take out the evidence of her murder and demand an eye for an eye. Who knew things would turn out like this? Was she dreaming or not? Damn it! Han Yunxi, I'm not here to compete with you. Duanmu Yao changed the subject and said coldly, I'm not here to discuss victory or defeat with you today. I'm here to take your life and avenge my imperial mother. With a wave of her sword, 10 sword maidens stepped out from the crowd. Long Fei recognized the 10 swordswomen at a glance. These were Duanmu Yao's personal swordsmen who'd been raised on Celestial Mountain for years. Their skills in the sword weren't low, and their combined strength was enough to match Duanmu Yao's own skills. Duanmu Yao was determined to kill Han Yunxi. Long Fei's icy eyes slowly narrowed into slits, revealing a frightening killing intent. Han Yunxi seemed to sense Long Fei's anger. She retreated to his side and quietly took hold of his clenched fists from behind, comforting him in silence. Long Fei actually calmed down quite a bit. In fact, Long Fei Yi could rest assured that Han Yunxi was no longer the Han Yunxi of the past. In the past, Han Yunxi had always been afraid that the Tianning imperial clan would make things difficult for her. She was even more afraid that a single misstep would ruin Qin Wangfei's reputation and offend His Highness Duke of Qin. And now, her greatest fear had become her greatest backer. What was there for her to be afraid of? Duanmuyao, one-on-one duels aren't just for show. Are you going back on your word? Han Yunxi asked with a smile. She did not give Duanmuyao an explanation. It's fine if you want to go back on your word. So what if it's a group fight? It's not like I don't have people on my side. At her words, everyone turned to look at His Highness Duke of Qin. Although His Highness Duke of Qin was standing there expressionlessly with no intention of making a move, everyone's hearts still raced in their chests. With His Highness Duke of Qin here, there was no need to talk about one-on-one duels or group fights. His Highness Duke of Qin alone was enough to sweep away Duanmuyao's group. Naturally, Duanmuyao was fearful. Han Yunxi, she said angrily, this princess came here today for revenge. Don't talk nonsense. No one's going to fight you one-on-one or group fights you. Han Yunxi sighed. Then just what do you want to do? You were the one who challenged me to a one-on-one duel. You even brought a bunch of helpers. If you don't want to fight me one-on-one or group fights, do you want this Wang Fei to stand there and let you chop me up? Ha! Gu Qisha couldn't help but laugh out loud. Much of the crowd laughed as well. In Han Yunxi's eyes, Duanmuyao's actions were truly laughable. There was no need for Long Fei Yi to send people to spread the news. Naturally, there would be people who would spread the news. Duanmuyao was bound to lose face. Duanmuyao flew into a rage out of humiliation. She had clearly come here to avenge herself, so how did things end up like this? Men, get him. Kill her. She roared. The 10 sword maidens unsheathed their swords, and several black-clothed swordsmen appeared out of thin air to protect Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't understand, but Gu Qisha and Mu Ling were shocked. They could sense the killing intent of these 10 swordsmen. Their martial arts were definitely much more powerful than Duanmuyao's 10 sword maidens. Duanmuyao could tell that these black-clothed swordsmen weren't simple. She shouted angrily, "Senior martial brother, Han Yunxi killed my imperial mother. I don't ask you to uphold justice for me, your junior martial sister, but I beg you not to protect her. You should also give my imperial father an explanation for this matter, and give my Western Zhou's citizens an explanation." Long Fei Yi said, "Where's the evidence? You slandered this prince's beloved consort for no reason. This prince wants an explanation from you. If you can't provide any evidence, don't blame this prince for being impolite." Tears welled up in Duanmuyao's eyes. Aggrieved, she took out a golden needle from her sleeve and held it up for everyone to see. "This is a golden needle found in my imperial mother's body. It's poisonous. This golden needle is specially used by Han Yunxi when she's practicing medicine. Aside from her, no one else has it." The golden needle in Duanmuyao's hand was indeed the same one that Han Yunxi usually used. This was a medical needle she had brought from the modern era. Its material, function, and shape were all different from those used in the ancient era. It had to be said that this thing was indeed a piece of evidence. Aside from special circumstances, Han Yunxi would only use this kind of medical needle when she was saving lives. Moreover, she would always disinfect it and put it away after use. However, there were a few times when she had dropped it in an emergency. Where had Duanmuyao gotten the one in her hand? Chu Tianyin was already planning to rely on Long Fei Yi and was currently undergoing Long Fei Yi's tests. There was no reason for him to give Duanmuyao something so important. Besides Chu Tianyin, who else could have gotten their hands on her needle? Was it Chu Qingge or Ningqing? Where did they get this golden needle from? Han Yunshi was too lazy to ponder the question any longer. If the other side wanted to frame her, why wouldn't they have enough evidence? Han Yunshi, tell me, is this needle yours or not? Duan Muyao asked loudly. Yes. When did you steal something from me? Give it back to me. Han Yunshi was even more self-righteous than her. You. Duan Muyao got angry every time she spoke to Han Yunshi. She was about to die from anger. You used a needle to poison my imperial mother. What else do you have to say for yourself? Duan Muyao asked again. You stole my needle and accused me of poisoning you. What do you think I have to say for myself? Han Yunshi retorted. Han Yunshi, you're still quibbling. Duan Muyao was about to spit out blood. Today you brought a needle and accused me of killing your imperial mother. Tomorrow you brought a hidden needle and accused me of killing your entire family, right? Han Yunshi asked again. Silence fell upon the scene. No one dared to interrupt. Duan Muyao was so angry that her breathing grew ragged as she gasped for breath. The coroners already found out that my mother was poisoned to death. Moreover, there are people in the Chu clan army who saw you appear around the barracks that night with their own eyes. Both the witnesses and evidence were present. If these witnesses and evidence were found by a third party, then Han Yunshi would indeed be guilty according to Cloud Realm Continent's laws. Unfortunately, these witnesses and evidence came from Duan Muyao's side, so it was highly suspicious that they were forged. Han Yunshi couldn't be bothered to argue with them about the validity of the witnesses and evidence. With Duan Muyao's pestering nature, there was no point in arguing with them. She had long discussed a plan with Long Fei Yi to kill two birds with one stone. They only needed to prove that the needle was a false accusation. There was no need to uncover the true cause of Empress Shue's death. As long as they could prove that the needle was a false accusation, then Duan Muyao would naturally suspect the person who gave her the needle. Once her attention was diverted, the matter would have nothing to do with them. Which coroner did you find to conduct the autopsy? Han Yunshi asked again. Lin Su from the Peace Pavilion. Duan Muyao replied loudly. The Peace Pavilion was a profit-making organization that provided all sorts of autopsy services to the imperial court and the common people. Lin Su could be considered the head of the Peace Pavilion and had a resounding reputation. I don't believe him. Han Yunshi said coldly. Unless you can find someone to do a new autopsy and prove that Empress Shui really did die from poison and that the needle was the cause, this Wang Fei won't admit it. Chu Qingge had put in plenty of effort on Duan Muyao's side. She even bribed Lin Su to do the autopsy himself, so Duan Muyao trusted Chu Qingge without a doubt. It doesn't matter. This princess wants you to accept it wholeheartedly. Duan Muyao was brimming with confidence. Then find Western Zhou's former coroner from the justice courts, Chao Tong, Grand Coroner Chao. Han Yunshi said slowly so that everyone present could hear her clearly. Everyone was frightened by her words. They couldn't help but suspect that Duan Muyao was here to slander Han Yunshi. Western Zhou's justice courts would never favor Han Yunshi. They'd definitely tell the truth based on facts. Meanwhile, Grand Coroner Chao Tong was Cloud Realm Continent's #1 coroner. His skills at autopsies were top-notch and his reputation was unquestionable. If Han Yunshi dared to invite him here, then it meant she wasn't guilty at all. Duan Muyao laughed out loud. Han Yunshi, stop pretending. You know full well that Chao Tong's retired for years. There's no way you can invite him here. And if I can? Han Yunshi retorted. What a joke. Duan Muyao still couldn't believe it. Chao Tong had solved many major cases for Western Zhou, but he'd retired for years due to personal reasons. Her imperial father had once sent the crown prince to invite him, but he'd failed. What was Han Yunshi to do? Grand Coroner Chow is already on his way here. He'll arrive in 2 days. Duanmu Yao, if you're still a filial daughter who wants to know how your imperial mother died, then hurry and bring her body here, Han Yunshi said seriously. Duanmu Yao finally realized she wasn't joking and was stunned. A frightening thought flashed through her mind. Could it be that Han Yunshi wasn't the culprit? Was she being used by Chu Qingge? The Chu clan was the real culprit. Duanmu Yao quickly recovered her wits. She refused to believe her own suspicions. She was certain that Han Yunshi was the real culprit, and that Han Yunshi was just scaring her. She said fiercely, "Fine. 2 days later, I'll make you accept it wholeheartedly. A life for a life." 2 days later, Chao Tong really did show up at the Yaoshui estate. Han Yunshi had only been able to invite Chao Tong because Third Elder Shin of Medical City had helped her in secret. As an elder of Medical City, Third Elder Shin couldn't openly help Han Yunshi, so Chao Tong didn't reveal his relationship with Third Elder Shin. Instead, he claimed to be an old official of Western Zhou and vowed to investigate the cause of Empress Shue's death. "Princess, don't worry. This one definitely won't let esteemed Empress die in peace." Chao Tong continued to call Duanmu Yao princess with sincerity. Duanmu Yao's resolute heart wavered again. She nodded and said, "My imperial mother's body is right there in the courtyard at the end of the alley. Let's go." Everyone followed Chao Tong out, with Long Fei Yi and Gu Qisha accompanying Han Yunshi. Gu Qisha murmured, "Did you bribe Chao Tong?" Han Yunshi murmured back, "It's already good enough that we managed to invite him." "You can't bribe him. Then aren't you afraid that he'll reveal the truth?" Gu Qisha grew alarmed. After all, it wasn't Han Yunshi who killed Empress Shui, but Long Fei Yi's men. His title as the world's #1 coroner wasn't just for show. Where did Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi get their self-confidence from? What medicine were they selling in their gourds? Chapter 658. Han Yunshi hadn't bribed Chao Tong, but wasn't she afraid that he'd expose the truth? Gu Qisha wasn't the only one puzzled. Ning Qing was curious as well. He knew Chao Tong couldn't be bribed, and he was certain that Long Fei Yi's men had killed Empress Shui. Where did Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi get their confidence from? After Empress Shui's death, Chu Tianyin had found plenty of coroner's examiners to examine her body, but none of them were able to find the true cause of death. What was the real cause of death? Were Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi so sure that Chao Tong wouldn't be able to find out the truth? Ning Cheng's gaze was fixed on Han Yunshi's back the entire time. His lips curved into a mischievous grin. Even when Han Yunshi's figure was swallowed up by the crowd, he still wanted to see more. He disguised himself and blended into the crowd, accompanied by a few servants in disguise. They were all puzzled. His Highness Duke of Ning had plenty of work to do, so why had he traveled non-stop for 2 days and 2 nights just to come to Yaoshui himself? The Bailey Trade Consortium had urged him multiple times to attend Ning Jing's wedding, but he'd refused every time. It wasn't like he could show his face in person, so what was the difference between watching the crime scene and sitting in the palace waiting for news? Empress Shui's corpse was placed in the courtyard at the end of the alley. Duanmu Yao wouldn't go so far as to reveal her mother's corpse to the public, so all unrelated people were kept outside the gates. Ning Cheng and a few of his retainers silently left the crowd until their figures vanished from the rooftops. Empress Shui's body was placed in the center of the courtyard, preserved in a specially made coffin. Duanmu Yao stood by the coffin, her face ashen and sorrowful. She still regretted not leaving the mountains sooner to save her mother. She'd held on to her father's hopes in the past, believing that he loved her mother so dearly that he'd do anything to save her. But reality proved that her father still loved his country more than anything else. The Chu clan was the main culprit behind her mother's death. Once she dealt with Han Yunxi, she wouldn't spare anyone from the Chu clan, including Chu Qingge. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duan Muyao carefully opened the coffin. Other than Long Fei Yi, who did not move, everyone present came forward to take a look. Long Fei Yi was not afraid of this kind of thing, he just did not like it. It had been almost 2 months since Empress Shui had passed away. If not for the low temperature at the end of winter and early spring, coupled with the nourishment of medicine, her corpse would have already started to wax. Although it had been nourished with expensive medicinal herbs, and the corpse did not emit a strange smell, nor did it show any signs of liquefaction, it had long been deformed. Its face and hands were covered with livor mortis, and the degree of decay in its body could not be seen with the naked eye. Only a professional would be able to tell how badly the corpse had decayed. Qiao Tong only glanced at the corpse, a hint of helplessness in his eyes. He wasn't in a hurry to examine it, so he asked, "Princess Yao, may I take a look at that golden needle first?" "Of course." Duan Muyao carefully handed the needle over. "There's still poison on the tip. Be careful." Qiao Tong held the golden needle and examined it carefully. "What kind of poison is this?" Before Duan Muyao could speak, Han Yunxi cut in. "It's sky scorpion poison. It doesn't matter if you touch it. As long as you don't get stabbed, you won't be poisoned." Duan Muyao gave a cold snort. "So you still remember?" Han Yunxi was too lazy to argue with her. Han Yunxi knew that Duan Muyao wouldn't believe her no matter what she said. She had invited Qiao Tong here so he could speak up for her. "Where did you find this needle?" Qiao Tong asked next. From the bottom of her foot, Chu Qingge had told Duan Muyao all this. "So, Princess Yao believes that Empress Shui died from poison?" Qiao Tong asked seriously. "Yes, it was Han Yunxi who used this needle to poison her." Duan Muyao didn't forget to point out Han Yunxi's identity. She spoke as if she'd seen it with her own eyes. Qiao Tong nodded and asked, "Princess Yao, this one doesn't recognize poisons, so I specially brought a poison doctor with me. Would it be possible to let him in?" Qiao Tong's reputation were there. Even if Han Yunxi had invited him here, Duan Muyao trusted him enough to agree without a second thought. The poison doctor examined the needle, then Empress Shui's foot. "This is sky scorpion poison," he said seriously. "Anyone poisoned by it will die within 3 steps. Han Yunxi, you're still trying to quibble." Duan Muyao raged. Han Yunxi snorted disdainfully and didn't answer. The poison doctor hurriedly explained, "Princess Yao, this one can only confirm 2 points. Firstly, the poison on the golden needle is scorpion poison. Secondly, Her Majesty the Empress Foot was poisoned by the needle and was indeed poisoned. As for whether esteemed Wang Fei died from sky scorpion poison, this one." Poison doctor said as he looked awkwardly at Qiao Tong. Qiao Tong waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. "Grand Coroner Qiao, what do you mean by this?" Duan Muyao didn't understand. To reply, "Princess, esteemed Empress Shui's passed away a long time ago. There's no point in examining her body," Qiao Tong said tactfully, but everyone understood his meaning. Generally speaking, there was no point in examining a corpse after 7 days of death. No matter how well Empress Shui's body was preserved, it was impossible to examine it. "Princess Yao, from the evidence we currently have, it's very likely that esteemed Empress Shui died from poison. However, because there's no way to conduct an in-depth examination, this one can't come to a conclusion," Qiao Tong said seriously. Duan Muyao knitted her brows. "What did you say?" Qiao Tong was still serious. "Princess Yao, esteemed Empress Shui was indeed poisoned, but this one can't confirm whether she died from poison. I hope Princess Yao will reconsider and not wrongly accuse a good person. Let the true culprit go." Duan Muyao's gaze turned complicated. She looked suspiciously at Han Yunxi, but Han Yunxi didn't say anything and allowed her to look. It was unknown what Duan Muyao was thinking, but after a while, she said angrily, "What else can't you confirm? The evidence is irrefutable, it was her." Yes, it was me. I'll admit it, all right. Han Yunxi suddenly said impatiently. Duan Muyao was very surprised, but Qiao Tong was angry. "Esteemed Wang Fei, if you want to admit your guilt, why did you invite old man here? What do we do now that the autopsy isn't conclusive? The golden needles were indeed mine, and there were needle wounds on the soles of my feet. If I don't admit it, who will?" Han Yunxi shrugged helplessly. "Esteemed Empress, old man just said that there was poison in the body. Although there were signs of poisoning, there was also physical evidence. However, we can't confirm whether esteemed Empress Shui died from poison, and we can't find any other cause of death, so we can't come to a conclusion. Do you understand?" Qiao Tong was a little anxious. Why didn't these two women understand even after he'd explained twice? One was Western Zhou's princess, a celestial mountain disciple, and the other was Qin Wangfei. They weren't stupid. Seeing that Han Yunxi didn't say anything, Qiao Tong asked again, "Esteemed Wang Fei, do you understand?" Third Elder Shen had helped him a lot, and this was the first time he'd asked him for help. He couldn't be a hindrance. Moreover, he'd been doing autopsies all his life and hadn't found a single case that was unjust, false, or wrong. This time, he had to make an exception and preserve his integrity in his later years. He couldn't make a hasty decision just because he couldn't do the autopsy. This was an autopsy, not a matter of one or the other logic. I understand, but it's a pity that some people still don't understand. Sigh, some people are stupid. Han Yunxi smiled. She didn't say who was stupid, but Duan Muyao immediately admitted it. She snorted, "Who says I don't understand? Great Coroner Chao, if you can't find any other evidence, then you can prove that she's the murderer. Don't you understand this logic?" Duan Muyao actually retorted to anger Qiao Tong. Qiao Tong's mouth twitched. He could tell that Qin Wangfei wasn't stupid. As for whether Princess Duan was stupid or not, he was at a loss. "I don't understand." Qiao Tong shook his head. Duan Muyao said seriously, "How can you not understand such a simple logic? If the murderer isn't Han Yunxi, why would the golden needles be stabbed under my imperial mother's feet? Could it be that someone framed her? After my imperial mother died, they added another needle." Long Fei Yi was the first to laugh at her words. Of course, he wasn't laughing because of Duan Muyao, but because of Han Yunxi. Without a doubt, Han Yunxi had been waiting for Duan Muyao to say it herself. Gu Qisha and Mu Ling were secretly amused as well. Qiao Tong was the only one who laughed out loud. "Princess Duan, you're right. If the needle was added later, then we might have jumped to conclusions today. The real murderer will probably laugh at us." Duan Muyao gave a start, frightened by her own words. If Qiao Tong or Han Yunxi had said those words in the beginning, she might have denied them immediately. But now that she'd said it herself, she couldn't help but think it over. When she recalled Qiao Tong's words and Han Yunxi's reaction, her resolute heart wavered again. She muttered to herself, "Chu Qingge, Princess Duan, we can't let esteemed Empress die with grievances." Qiao Tong said, "It's just a single needle. This Wang Fei won't accept it even if I admit it." Han Yunxi said coldly. Duan Muyao glanced at Han Yunxi before relenting. "Then what do you want to do? We can't do an autopsy now. Princess Duan, old man has an idea, but..." Qiao Tong was in a difficult position. "Go ahead and say it," Duan Muyao said seriously. Old man remembers that there's a wondrous medicine in the world called rising from the dead. Before he could finish, Duanmu Yao grew agitated. Rising from the dead. You're thinking too much. Rising from the dead is a heaven-defying medicine that can restore a corpse to its original state in a short period of time. But once the time passes, the corpse will turn into a puddle of blood. In other words, there won't even be bones left. Mu Ling was the one to explain. She knew all the wondrous medicines in the world. No wonder you're a genius from Medicine City. My apologies for my lack of manners. Chow Tong smiled and bowed. I don't dare. Mu Ling was very modest as she turned to Duanmu Yao. This medicine is hard to come by. It's hard to find it in such a short time. According to this one's understanding, this medicine comes from Medicine City's medicine hut. Chow Tong looked towards Han Yunxi and tried to sound her out. I wonder if esteemed Wang Fei. Han Yunxi cut him off before he could finish. What's there to be afraid of? As long as the medicine hut has the medicine, this Wang Fei will definitely ask master for it. Chow Tong gave a start, a little lost. He wasn't trying to test esteemed Wang Fei's courage, but whether or not esteemed Wang Fei could beg the king of medicine for rising from the dead. Why was esteemed Wang Fei so agitated? Duanmu Yao saw Han Yunxi's agitation. She didn't want to believe that Han Yunxi wasn't her mother's murderer, but Han Yunxi's actions had shaken her heart again and again. Had she really framed Han Yunxi? Had she really been played for a fool by Chu Qingge? Duanmu Yao's mind was in a mess with these two questions. Princess Duan, then, should we use this medicine or not? Chow Tong asked seriously. Chapter 659. Should she use the medicine of resurrection or not? Duanmu Yao's gaze finally returned to her mother's corpse. She hesitated. Empress Shui was already miserable enough. If her body didn't exist, she would never be able to rest in peace. In the silence, Chow Tong sighed deeply. Even as a coroner, he faced corpses every day, but he couldn't bear to see such a thing happen. After a while, Duanmu Yao asked in a choked voice, Great Coroner Chow, is there no other way? Chow Tong shook his head helplessly. There's no other way. Duanmu Yao fell silent again. For some reason, Han Yunxi couldn't bear it. It wasn't for Duanmu Yao, but for Empress Shui. After all, Empress Shui was innocent. Han Yunxi couldn't help looking at Long Fei Yi, but saw that Long Fei Ye's eyes were cold and unmoved. This man's heart. How cold could it be? Even though he was always warm, she hadn't forgotten his cold-bloodedness and heartlessness. What would Duanmu Yao think if she found out the truth one day? Suddenly, Duanmu Yao's resolute voice broke Han Yunxi's train of thought. Use the medicine. If we can't find the real culprit, we won't be able to rest in peace even if we bury the corpse. What's the use? She looked at Han Yunxi and snorted. Han Yunxi, you have to do what you say. If you can't get the medicine of resurrection, then you'll be the one who killed my mother. Han Yunxi didn't answer her. Instead, she ordered, Men, send a messenger hawk to the medicine hut and ask for the medicine. With that, the matter was put on hold for the time being. It only took half a day to send a messenger hawk from Yaoshuwei to the medicine hut and back. Duanmu Yao had no intention of leaving. Han Yunxi didn't have that much time to accompany her. She and Long Fei Yi went back to rest first. Ning Qing sat in a corner of the roof, watching Han Yunxi's figure disappear at the end of the alley. He was still in a daze. Master, I'm afraid, there's something fishy going on, one of the attendants murmured. Ning Qingxi lazily rose to his feet and stretched. Then he asked seriously, Say, what do you think Han Yunxi's hiding in her head? The attendants were left speechless. How should he know? Master, if Duan Muyao suspects Chu Chinga, then we. Another attendant reminded him. What's the rush? Even if you suspect them, you'll only suspect the Chu clan. Ning Qing had left the Chu clan with a trick up his sleeve. The medicine hut, but the medicine huts, medicines to medicine, but the decoction ants, the medicine huts, and Han to medicine hut, SB. Han Yunshi asked Mu Linger in a low voice, is there really a particular way to use this medicine? As far as I know, there isn't. Once it's cooked, just pour it over the corpse, Mu Ling murmured back. Senior pill fiend, is that right? That old thing, the king of medicine, wants to use this chance to lure you all over, Gu Qi Sha revealed the truth. Han Yunshi had no choice. She was busy dealing with Duan Muyao, so she could only ignore the king of medicine's plans for now. In any case, the king of medicine couldn't do anything to her even if he lured them over. What if the king of medicine starts making conditions again by the time we get there? Mu Ling said worriedly. She'd heard of Han Yunshi's trip to Medicine Hut before. That's too much of a loss of face for me as his disciple, isn't it? Han Yunshi teased. If he dares to do that again, I'll ask that old man from medicine requesting cave for help. As Han Yunshi spoke, she glanced at Gu Qi Sha from the corner of her eyes. Gu Qi Sha hadn't said a word this entire time. Before sunset, Han Yunshi had already told Duan Muyao and Chao Tong the news. Neither of them had any objections. They made some preparations, mainly strengthening the defenses to prevent Empress Shui's corpse from deteriorating. The next day, Duan Muyao woke up bright and early. She invited Chao Tong to sit in her carriage before rushing to Long Fei Ye's side courtyard to wait for them. Who knew that even after waiting for a long time, Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi still hadn't come out. Duan Muyao couldn't bring herself to lose face, so she had Chao Tong knock on the door. After asking around, she found out that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi had left late last night. Why did they leave first? Chao Tong was helpless. Esteemed Wang Fei said that when you arrived in Medicine City, you should go directly to the Council of Elders. Someone will bring you to the Medicine Hut, the servant said seriously. Chao Tong didn't ask any questions, but returned to the carriage to see Duan Muyao's face turn gloomy. It was obvious that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi didn't want to travel with her. Actually, Ning Qing was hiding in the shadows as well. He'd come early in the morning to wait for them, but hadn't seen anyone either. Master, Miss Jing's wedding date has been set, so there's no time. In a few days, the Tang clan will come to propose marriage. The wedding will be at the end of the month, the servant reported. Miss Jing and young Master Nuo have already been arguing for 2 days. Miss Jing refuses to stay at the Tang clan for a full year, so young Master Nuo has asked you to go back and preside over the situation. How troublesome. Ning Cheng was impatient, but he still returned to Cloud Realm Trade Consortium. He couldn't be careless about the Tang clan's affairs, so he wouldn't allow Ning Jing to act recklessly. Follow Duan Muyao and the rest. Report to me immediately if anything happens. He was about to leave when he added, keep an eye on that needle for your lordship. The servant was bewildered, but didn't dare to ask. By now, Han Yunshi and the rest had already traveled an entire night and were far from Yaoshui Prefecture. Gu Qi Sha and Mu Ling hadn't followed them. Mu Ling had been very excited to see the medicine hut for herself, but after learning that Gu Qi Sha wasn't coming, she decided to stay behind in Yaoshui Prefecture. Gu Qi Sha only said, "What does it have to do with this old man?" before deciding not to come. Han Yunshi didn't pursue the matter, while Long Fei Yi seemed to have guessed something, but didn't ask. Long Fei Yi was currently reading a letter from the Tang clan about Tang Li's wedding. Has Cloud Realm Trade Consortium made any progress in planting medicinal ingredients in northern Li's snowy mountains? Long Fei asked. Not yet. I'm afraid they've been delayed by Ning Jing's wedding, Chu Shifeng replied from outside the carriage. Keep a close eye on them. Long Fei was still very concerned about the matter. After all, it would directly affect Han Yunxi's position at Pill Fiend Pharmacy. Han Yunxi didn't take the matter to heart. As she saw it, even if Cloud Realm Trade Consortium really did manage to grow the medicinal ingredients, she only needed to tell Medical City about it and they'd be unable to sell their products. She was more concerned with the matter at hand. Long Fei, just how did Empress Shui die? Han Yunxi still didn't know the truth. She knew that Long Fei had sent men to kill Empress Shui, but she didn't know the cause of death. She assumed it was an assassination, but there were no obvious wounds on the body. The Chu clan and Ning Qing must have done an autopsy as well, but they probably didn't find anything. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made a wound on Empress Shui's foot, but poisoned the original wound instead. Long Fei leaned lazily against the high pillow as if dozing off. Han Yunxi scooted over and pushed him. Tell me, why are you so sure that Chao Tong won't be able to find anything? Aren't you afraid that the corpse will give you away? Long Fei reached out and pulled her into his arms. That's not important. The results weren't important. What mattered was the process and Duan Muyao's opinion. Tell me, it's not like I'll betray you. Han Yunxi wouldn't give up until she knew the truth. Long Fei still didn't speak. Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes and said threateningly, Are you going to tell me or not? Long Fei still shook his head. Han Yunxi suddenly tickled him under the armpit, but Long Fei quickly dodged and dropped her hand. Only Han Yunxi knew that his greatest weakness was being ticklish. Han Yunxi wouldn't give up and kept tickling him. Are you going to tell me or not? Are you going to tell me or not? Long Fei only dodged silently at first, but he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Still, he was stubborn and wouldn't tell her. The two of them began to make a ruckus inside the carriage, their movements loud and clear. Amidst their laughter were Han Yunxi's gasps for breath. Outside, Uncle Gao and Chu Shifeng exchanged glances, their imaginations running wild over the events in the carriage. An autopsy to prove one's innocence was a big deal. News of their trip to the medical hut had already spread, so all of Cloud Realm Continent was paying attention. But the two of them were still in the mood to play around in the carriage. Would Duan Muyao lose her mind if she found out? After a few days of travel, Han Yunxi's group arrived at the medical hut. Pill King did not make things difficult for them as they had imagined. Instead, he took out the Rising Dead pill and enthusiastically expressed his willingness to help them with the medicine. Han Yunxi mused that this old thing must have really learned his lesson. Yunxi, did you read the ancient medicine tome I gave you last time? The King of Medicine asked with a chuckle. I did, Han Yunxi replied. She was busy cultivating the second level of the poison storage space, so where would she find the time to study ancient texts? She'd leave it to Mu Ling and Gu Qisha to study while she flipped through Mu Ling notes. Then, is there anything that you don't understand? The King of Medicine asked. He'd given the ancient medicine tome to Han Yunxi so she could write letters to him and ask for his guidance. That way, master and disciple would gradually get to know each other better and solidify their master-disciple relationship. Since he couldn't force this girl to stay, he was more than willing to be her master. I'm still reading. I'm still reading. I'll think about the parts one don't understand. It won't be too late to ask after I understand them, Han Yunxi said half-heartedly. After chatting a bit more, she went to visit the old man at Medicine Requesting Cave. Compared to the King of Medicine, Han Yunxi liked the old man more. Unfortunately, he refused to see her because he had no good news. He was waiting for his disciple to return. Han Yunxi couldn't help but feel angry at Gu's smiling eyes. No matter how much she pitied the old man, she'd never betray Gu. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi rested at the medicine hut for half a day before Duanmu Yao and Qiao Tong were brought over by the Council of Elders. The king of medicine examined the corpse and immediately brewed the medicine himself without saying a word. Qiao Tong greatly respected the king of medicine. He was already so old, but he acted like a little follower, following the king of medicine around and helping him. On the other hand, Han Yunxi, the disciple, stood on the sidelines and watched with folded arms. Truly, truly, outrageous. It was also here that Duanmu Yao finally believed that Han Yunxi had been accepted as a disciple by the king of medicine. Her already bad mood worsened. After all, the status of a disciple of the king of medicine wasn't low. Aside from being Qin Wangfei, Han Yunxi had another identity to show off. Duanmu Yao hated the feeling of being pulled closer. Soon, the king of medicine finished brewing the medicine and personally came over to administer it. Although he put on an act and made a lot of fuss, the medicine still ended up being sprinkled on the corpse. As more and more medicine was sprinkled on the corpse, it slowly recovered. Qiao Tong watched from the sidelines, his brows furrowed even tighter. What had he discovered? Chapter 660. The medicine of resurrection was indeed worthy of its reputation. This name was not given blindly. As more and more of the medicine was sprinkled, the corpse gradually recovered. Before long, the corpse had returned to its original state. Aside from a slightly greenish complexion, it was no different from a sleeping person. Those who didn't know better might actually think that Empress Xue had come back from the dead. Everyone was stunned by the effects of the medicine. Even Long Feiyi was secretly shocked. There were many things that couldn't be accomplished by martial arts, but medicine could create miracles. Qiao Tong's brows furrowed as he watched the corpse slowly recover. He had seen the secret hidden in the corpse at a glance. This case could be said to be half solved. He shook his head in disbelief. At this time, everyone was still shocked by the effects of the medicine and didn't notice his reaction. The medicine of resurrection will only last for 4 hours. After that, the corpse will turn into a pool of blood and not a single bone will be left. Girl, what do you want to examine? Hurry up. The king of medicine only had eyes for Han Yunxi. If not for Han Yunxi, he wouldn't have let this group of people into the medicine hut so casually. Great Coroner Chao, hurry up. Han Yunxi was calm and didn't look like a suspect. Duanmu Yao had been observing her all this time. Although she didn't want to believe it, the more she looked at Han Yunxi, the more she felt that Han Yunxi didn't look like the murderer. Duanmu Yao was irritated and stopped looking at her. Cold, she said, Great Coroner Chao, the cost of restoring the corpse is not small. You must be careful. If there's any mistake, you should know the consequences. Princess Duan, there's something this one must tell you first. Qiao Tong said seriously. Is it more important than the autopsy? You only have 4 hours and you want to waste it. Duanmu Yao was angry. Unexpectedly, Qiao Tong said, this matter is as important as the autopsy. Princess Duan, you must know. Please come over here. Duanmu Yao stood at the head of the coffin while Qiao Tong stood at the bottom. Why did he want her to come over? Duanmu Yao walked over suspiciously. What are you trying to say? Can't you be more direct? 4 hours isn't. Before she could finish, Duanmu Yao abruptly shut her mouth. She followed Qiao Tong's finger and saw that the wound on her mother's foot had disappeared. The wound on Empress Xue's foot was caused by a golden needle. It wasn't obvious at first, but due to the poison, it had turned bluish-purple. When the coroner had removed the needle, it had caused a second injury, so the wound had become obvious. Now, how could it disappear? How? Duan Muyao couldn't believe it. She moved closer to take a closer look, but she still couldn't see a wound. The bottom of Empress Shue's foot was smooth and white. There wasn't the slightest trace of injury. Impossible. I don't believe it. Duan Muyao turned to look at Han Yunxi again. This time, Han Yunxi was looking back at her, her eyes clear and bright. Even if she knew who the real culprit was, there was nothing to feel guilty about. What did Long Fei Ye's murder have to do with her? She just didn't understand why Chu Qingge and Ning Qing wanted to make things difficult for her. If they couldn't find the cause of death, they could have faked a sword wound to pin it on Long Fei Ye. Princess Yao, this is precisely what I wanted to tell you. The rising dead drug will restore a corpse to its original state. After death, any traces of the body will be erased. Thus, Duan Muyao had figured this out before the drug was administered. She seemed to have lost all strength as she muttered to herself, so my imperial mother didn't die from a poison needle. That's right. Qiao Tong was very certain. Princess Yao, this needle was stabbed into a steamed empress's foot after she died. The person who used the needle was extremely skilled. If it wasn't for the rising dead drug, this one would have had a hard time proving that the wound on a steamed empress's foot was caused after she died. You suspected it long ago? Duan Muyao demanded. Yes, Qiao Tong was very frank. Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you explain? Why? Duan Muyao was about to cry. Why didn't you say anything earlier? If you did, my mother wouldn't have been reduced to ashes. Why? Princess Yao, this one only suspected. If I wanted proof, it would only be in theory. I don't think you believe me anyway. Now that you've seen it with your own eyes, this one won't explain any further, Qiao Tong replied honestly. Duan Muyao was so angry that she almost drew her sword and killed him. But she had to admit that he was right. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed anyone's excuse for Han Yunxi's crimes. Han Yunxi had been framed, and the needle had been added. So all the evidence in her hands was fake. Who else could have killed her imperial mother besides Chu Qingge's group? What a Chu Qingge! She actually dared to play me like this. She wanted to use me against Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi. No way. Hatred turned into strength as Duan Muyao's eyes turned red. Qiao Tong, why aren't you inspecting the corpse yet? Just how did my imperial mother die? You have to give me an answer. The corpse had already begun to change, showing signs of hardening like other corpses. Qiao Tong quickly took out a pile of small tools and put on a pair of gloves to examine it. Although time was limited, Qiao Tong still carefully examined the corpse from head to toe, not missing a single detail. Silence fell upon the courtyard as everyone's attention rested on Qiao Tong's hands. Han Yunxi was still a little nervous right now. If Qiao Tong really did find out something, she and Long Fei Yi would really be smashing their own feet with a rock. As time trickled by, livor mortis began to appear on the corpse. Qiao Tong knitted his brows as his eyes focused. He seemed to have discovered something as he lifted his head to glance at Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi. Everyone waited, expecting him to speak, but he didn't. Instead, he lowered his head again. Just how is it? Duan Muyao couldn't wait any longer. Qiao Tong glanced at the time before revealing an awkward expression. Princess, this one still hasn't figured out the cause of death. There's still time, so this one will do his best. More than 2 hours had passed, but they still didn't know how she died. How were they supposed to find other evidence? Duan Muyao grew angry. Qiao Tong, what are you saying? How can you not figure out the cause of death? What kind of world's #1 coroner are you? Princess Duan, take a look for yourself. There's no sign of any injury on the Empress body, Qiao Tong explained. If it was so easy to figure out, why would I need you? Duanmu Yao retorted. Qiao Tong had no choice but to shut his mouth. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered a situation like this, but it was the first time he was so pressed for time. He had to seize the moment. Han Yunqi was also sizing up the corpse, her heart filled with bewilderment. She'd already eliminated the possibility of external injuries, and there was no sign of poisoning. Could it be that she died of illness? Some deaths due to illness couldn't be found in a short period of time, let alone ancient autopsy techniques. Even modern medicine couldn't figure it out. Princess Duan, this one is certain that esteemed Wang Fei didn't die from external injuries or poisoning. There's only one possibility, which is that she died of illness. May I know if esteemed Wang Fei had any previous illnesses? Qiao Tong asked seriously. My imperial mother's health has always been good. She would occasionally catch a cold, but there's no way she'd die of illness. Someone must have killed her. Duanmu Yao was agitated. Although she'd been away from her imperial mother for a long time, they'd still exchanged letters. She was very familiar with her mother's condition. Princess Duan, this one can't rule out the possibility of someone using esteemed Empress's illness to murder her. If we want to figure out the cause of death, I'm afraid we'll have to. Qiao Tong hesitated, but didn't finish his sentence. After all, he was facing the corpse of Western Zhou's Empress. After all, Emperor Kong Qing had been negotiating with the Chu clan troops and Tianning's Prince Regent to return the Empress's corpse and hand over the true culprit. Although the Empress was dead, she was more important than alive. Afraid of what? Tell me. Duanmu Yao asked anxiously. Qiao Tong was still hesitating when Han Yunqi spoke up. I'm afraid we'll have to dissect the corpse. From what Han Yunqi knew, ancient coroners only did superficial examinations. It was surprising that Qiao Tong dared to dissect the corpse to find out the cause of the illness. Impossible. Duanmu Yao refused without hesitation. She could accept the bones dissolving into a puddle of blood, but she couldn't accept dissecting the corpse. She would never allow her imperial mother to suffer such humiliation after her death. Princess Duan, if we don't dissect the corpse, I'm afraid we won't be able to find out the true cause of death, Qiao Tong said helplessly. Are you sure you'll find out if we dissect the corpse? Duanmu Yao retorted coldly. Qiao Tong admitted honestly, I can't be certain. Duanmu Yao glared at him, but had no strength to argue. She knelt by Empress Shui's corpse as tears streamed down her cheeks. She regretted it. He was thoroughly regretting it. She didn't dare to believe Chu Qingge's lies. She shouldn't have caused such a ruckus. Imperial Mother's corpse was about to disappear. How was she supposed to explain things to Imperial Father? She was hoping to borrow the strength of Celestial Mountain to force the Chu clan and the Duke of Ning to investigate the cause of her Imperial Mother's death. Then she could bring her body back to Western Zhou. How would she have the face to go back now? All of this was Chu Qingge's fault. Qiao Tong didn't give up just because he couldn't figure out the cause of death. His attitude was as earnest as ever. Princess Duan, although we can't confirm esteemed Empress's cause of death, we can at least prove that Qin Wangfei wasn't the one who killed her. The Chu clan's motives for accusing Qin Wangfei of murder are worth considering. Who else could it be but them? Chu Qingge, Ning Cheng. This princess can't exist under the same sky as you. Duanmu Yao gritted her teeth. She imagined that Chu Qingge must be laughing at her right now. Qiao Tong didn't give any conclusions, while Han Yunqi didn't speak up to explain herself. Just like that, Duanmu Yao was convinced that the Chu clan was behind the murder. She wished that none of this had happened at all, that she could be smart enough to see through Chu Qingge's schemes. Unfortunately, the truth was right before her eyes. Abruptly, a strange sound came from the corpse. In a flash, Empress Shue's corpse dissolved into a puddle of blood and water. Not even her bones remained. Imperial Mother. Yao Yao has let you down. Let you down. Duanmu Yao wailed as tears streamed down her face. Although Han Yunxi knew the truth, she still couldn't sympathize with Duanmu Yao. It's good that Empress Shue's gone like this, she thought. The real culprit was standing right by Han Yunxi's side. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes as cold as ice the entire time. He seemed like a heartless bystander standing outside the scene. Han Yunxi took his hand and murmured. Chapter 661. Han Yunxi asked in a low voice, Long Fei Yi, what's the real cause of death? Internal injuries, Long Fei Yi muttered back. Internal injuries. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just what happened? Using internal energy to injure the 5 viscera without leaving any marks on the surface. Once the chest is cut open, everything will be clear at a glance, Long Fei Yi said. How can it injure the 5 viscera without leaving any marks? That's not something a normal person can do, right? Han Yunxi asked. Only Celestial Mountain's internal energy can do it, Long Fei Yi replied honestly. Han Yunxi finally realized how dangerous the situation had been. If Duanmu Yao had been a little more ruthless and had Chao Tong cut open the chest, the truth would have been revealed. Anyone who knew Celestial Mountain's internal energy arts was either Long Fei Yi himself or one of his subordinate swordsmen. This was what it meant to kill without spilling blood. Han Yunxi's heart was filled with emotions. After a long silence, she asked, Long Fei Yi, Empress Shui is innocent, right? Her status makes it impossible for her to be innocent, Long Fei Yi replied. Han Yunxi wanted to retort, but didn't know how. She asked, then what about her status as Qin Wangfei? Long Fei Yi looked at her with furrowed brows. What are you thinking about? A general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. How many skeletons are piled up for the glorious throne? Han Yunxi sighed with emotion. It's destined to be piled up with thousands of skeletons. The only difference is whether or not the person sitting on the throne can start a golden age so that Cloud Realm continent will no longer suffer from famine, war, or displacement. As Long Fei Yi spoke, his gaze flickered to the sobbing Duanmu Yao kneeling on the ground. His eyes were as cold as ever, devoid of sympathy or pity. After circling around in such a big circle, everything was still under his control. Ning Cheng and Duanmu Yao could fight it out. Han Yunxi had almost forgotten how big this man's heart was. At this moment, she remembered. She interlocked her fingers with his. Long Fei Yi, I'll accompany you. Long Fei tightened his grip on her hand without a word. Before he left, he walked up to Chao Tong and questioned, where are the golden needles? As soon as Chao Tong took out the golden needle, Long Fei Yi snatched it away. Return it to its rightful owner. Chao Tong looked up at Long Fei Yi. Other than smiling, what else could he do? This needle originally belonged to the Princess Consort, so it should be returned to its rightful owner. Besides, even if it wasn't esteemed Wang Fei's, he had no choice but to give it to His Highness Duke of Qin. Return it to its rightful owner. Han Yunxi smiled and reached out to Long Fei Yi. From today onwards, anything you lose belongs to your lordship. Don't even think about getting it back. Long Fei Yi was very unhappy. Han Yunxi was resentful, but didn't dare to fight with him. She felt that she should be more careful in the future so she didn't cause any more trouble. Long Fei Yi wrapped the needle in a handkerchief before putting it in his sleeve. Han Yunxi knew that this misophobic fellow would definitely wash the needle multiple times when he got home. Duanmu Yao wanted to kneel on the ground and cry, but Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were already preparing to leave. To them, this matter was basically over. The only thing they could be sure of was that Chu Qingge and Ning Qing had forged evidence to deceive Duan Muyao. That made them the biggest suspects. Han Yunxi thanked Xiao Tong before preparing to leave with Long Fei Yi. The King of Medicine quickly chased after her with a chuckle. "Lass, aren't you going to stay for a few more days?" The King of Medicine's tone made it sound like they were very familiar with each other. Because the King of Medicine had once wanted to keep Han Yunxi at the medical hut, Long Fei Yi no longer had a good impression of it. Before Han Yunxi could speak, Long Fei Yi asked coldly, "Is there anything else?" The King of Medicine didn't have a good impression of Long Fei Yi either. He had long guessed that if it wasn't for Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi might have agreed to stay with him at the medical hut. Still, the King of Medicine was a shrewd old man. He wasn't stupid enough to offend Long Fei Yi in front of Han Yunxi. He was still smiling kindly. "It's nothing important. Be careful on the road. Lass, you should take a look at that ancient medical book of yours." I will. I'm reading it already." Han Yunxi might have been half-hearted, but her attitude was better than before. At least she wasn't so hostile to the King of Medicine anymore. Xiao Tong saw this with his own eyes and heart. He knew that Han Yunxi was the King of Medicine's disciple, but never expected Han Yunxi to be so impudent in front of the King of Medicine. This lass really didn't know how lucky she was. If the King of Medicine hadn't been willing to take out the rising dead, she wouldn't have been able to escape punishment so easily. She was really too impudent. The King of Medicine watched as Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi left. He was grinning from ear to ear. He didn't mind Han Yunxi's impudence at all. Han Yunxi's attitude towards him this time was clearly much better than the last time. He thought that he had done well as a master. To be able to take in such a genius as Han Yunxi as his disciple, he didn't wait at the medicine hut for nothing all these years. The King of Medicine returned with a chuckle. The moment he saw Xiao Tong and Duan Muyao, he immediately resumed his serious expression and didn't smile. "You're still not leaving." He rudely chased them away. Xiao Tong hurriedly bowed. "Senior, sorry for the disturbance. This one will take his leave." Duan Muyao was still crying, immersed in her sorrow. Xiao Tong was about to leave and felt really bad about it, so he came back to persuade her. "Princess Duan, you should leave. Don't hurt your eyes from crying. Princess Duan, let's go. You can only avenge esteemed Empress after you recover, isn't that right?" The word avenge successfully roused Duan Muyao's fighting spirit. She rose to her feet and said coldly, "Chu Qingge, Duan Muyao, swear that I won't rest until I get my revenge." Around 3 days after Xiao Tong and Duan Muyao left the medicine hut, news spread throughout Cloud Realm continent. Because of Xiao Tong's participation, Western Zhou's Emperor Kongqing had no doubts. He angrily dispatched troops to the west of Fenglin Prefecture to warn Ningqing that if he didn't hand over the Chu clan troops, Western Zhou would wash Tianning in blood to avenge the Empress. Duan Muyao pulled herself together again and led a group of Celestial Mountain swordsmen to push an empty coffin filled with blood to the gates of Western Liang's imperial city. She wanted Chu Qingge to meet her outside. In any case, Western Zhou and Tianning were at daggers drawn and on tense terms. Ningqing had been busy teaching Ningjing a lesson at Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's headquarters, but rushed back to Western Liang as soon as he heard the news. As soon as he saw Chu Qingge, he raged, "What are you doing? What did you promise your lordship in the first place?" Ningqing was no fool. If Chu Qingge hadn't told him that she'd found a reliable person to fake the wound, he wouldn't have acted rashly. Xiao Tong didn't find out that the wound was fake. They used the medicine hut's miracle medicine to restore the corpse. Chu Qingge explained hastily. "Ningqing, just who killed Empress Shui? Just how did she die?" Ningqing gave Chu Qingge a cold look. He didn't want to waste any more words with this woman. If Empress Shui hadn't been killed by Long Fei Ye's men, they would have found the cause of death long ago. They hadn't found the cause of death or the true culprit, but they'd succeeded in convincing Duanmu Yao that he and the Chu clan were the culprits. Now that the corpse was gone, he and the Chu clan were set to take the blame. Ningqing, what do we do now? Emperor Kongqing's looking like he'll really start a war. Chu Qingge said anxiously. Ningqing didn't answer. He wasn't worried about Emperor Kongqing, but Duanmu Yao. Long Fei Yi had done all he could to sow discord between Duanmu Yao and the Chu clan for a reason. The central regions of Cloud Realm continent were home to the aristocratic families, the eastern regions were home to the merchants, and the western regions were home to the Jianghu. The three-way battlefield spanned thousands of li and was home to many factions of the Jianghu. Now that they'd offended Duanmu Yao, they'd offended Celestial Mountain as well as half of the Jianghu. That was a lot of trouble. While Ningqing was lost in thought, a eunuch rushed in. Your Highness Duke of Ning, the Ministry of War has sent word that the 3 batches of military grain from three-way black market have all been robbed. Ningqing grew alarmed. Where were they robbed? Eternal Space Mountain. They were robbed as soon as they entered, the eunuch replied. Eternal Space Mountain was the territory of the Eternal Space faction. Besides themselves, who else would dare to rob the goods passing through their territory? Ningqing slammed a fist on the table and said coldly, pass down my orders. All military supplies are to be on guard against the Jianghu's forces. And also, contact Carefree City and the City of Daughters. Have their young lords come see your lordship and tell them there's something we need to discuss. The eunuch hastily left with his orders. Chu Qingge's face was ashen. Ningqing, if we start fighting with Western Zhou and Duanmu Yao joins in, then won't we? Before she could finish, Ningqing cut her off coldly. Don't worry. It was the Chu clan who killed Emperor Shui. It has nothing to do with Tianning. He was clearly planning to hand over Chu Tianyin. Chu Qingge understood. She hesitated as if she wanted to plead on Chu Tianyin's behalf, but in the end she said nothing. She always remembered that it was Chu Tianyin, her father, and her uncles who'd arranged for her to end up where she was today. She'd been ruthless to herself for so long, so how could she show mercy to anyone else now? She smiled and said, handing over Chu Tianyin and the Chu clan troops isn't a bad choice. In any case, the Chu clan's driving arrow archers don't have much fighting power left. Ningqing ignored her and prepared to leave when he suddenly remembered something. He turned back and asked coldly, where's your lordship's item? What item? Chu Qingge was lost. The acupuncture needle. Ningqing said coldly. Don't tell your lordship that you lost it. Only then did Chu Qingge remember. She felt helpless as well. That thing, I told Duanmu Yao about it, but, lost it. Ningqing didn't want to hear her explanation. Chu Qingge didn't even dare to see Duanmu Yao, so how was she supposed to know where the item had gone? She had no answer. You better find it back, or else your lordship will hand you over too. Ningqing said coldly before leaving without looking back. You! Ningqing, what do you mean by this? Chu Qingge was furious. She chased after him for a few steps, but couldn't catch up. Am I not even worth one of Han Yunxi's needles? Ningqing, what do you want that acupuncture needle for? As soon as Ningqing left, he found the same guard from before and asked coldly, where's the item? To reply, Master, this subordinate couldn't get close to the medicine hut, so I don't know who has the item, the guard reported. Ningqing's face was gloomy. After a while, he asked, can you find another one? The guard looked troubled. He was about to reply when a warm voice spoke up. Duke of Ning, what time is it now? You're still thinking about Han Yunqi's acupuncture needle. What do you want to do? Looking in the direction of the voice, they saw that the person who had come was, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.